This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read and recorded by William Coon, October 2006. The First and the Last, a Drama in 3 Scenes, by John Galsworthy. Persons of the play: Keith Darrant, K.C., Larry Darrant, his brother. Wanda. Scene 1. It is 6 o'clock of a November evening in Keith Darrant's study. A large, dark curtained room where the light from a single reading lamp falling on a Turkey carpet, on books beside a large armchair, on the deep blue and gold coffee service, makes a sort of oasis before a log fire. In red Turkish slippers and an old brown velvet coat, Keith Darrant sits asleep. He has a dark, clean-cut, clean-shaven face, dark, grizzling hair, dark, twisting eyebrows. The curtain door, away out in the dim part of the room behind him, is opened so softly that he does not awake. Larry Darrant enters and stands half lost in the curtain over the door. A thin figure with a worn, high cheek-boned face, deep sunk blue eyes, and wavy hair all ruffled, a face which still has a certain beauty. He moves inwards along the wall, stands still again, and utters a gasping sigh. Keith stirs in his chair. Keith. Who's there? Larry, in a stifled voice. Only I, Larry. Keith, half-waked. Come in. I was asleep. He does not turn his head, staring sleepily at the fire. The sound of Larry's breathing can be heard. Turning his head a little. Well, Larry, what is it? Larry comes skirting along the wall as if craving its support outside the radius of the light. Staring. Are you ill? Larry stands still again and heaves a deep sigh. Keith, rising with his back to the fire and staring at his brother. What is it, man? Then, with a brutality born of nerves suddenly ruffled. Have you committed a murder that you stand there like a fish? Larry, in a whisper. Yes, Keith. Keith, with vigorous disgust. By Jove, drunk again. In a voice changed by sudden apprehension. What do you mean by coming here in this state? I told you, if you weren't my brother. Come here where I can see you. What's the matter with you, Larry? With a lurch, Larry leaves the shelter of the wall and sinks into a chair in the circle of light. Larry. It's true. Keith steps quickly forward and stares down into his brother's eyes, where is a horrified wonder, as if they would never again get on terms with his face. Keith, angry, bewildered, in a low voice. What in God's name is this nonsense? He goes quickly over to the door and draws the curtain aside to see that it is shut, then comes back to Larry, who is huddling over the fire. Come, Larry, pull yourself together and drop exaggeration. What on earth do you mean? Larry, in a shrill outburst. It's true, I tell you. I've killed a man. Keith, bracing himself coldly. Be quiet. Larry lifts his hands and wrings them, utterly taken aback. Why come here and tell me this? Larry. Whom should I tell, Keith? I came to ask what I'm to do. Give myself up, or what? Keith. When? What? Larry. Last night. Keith. Good God, how? Where? You'd better tell me quietly from the beginning. Here, drink this coffee. It'll clear your head. He pours out and hands him a cup of coffee. Larry drinks it off. Larry. My head. Yes, it's like this, Keith. There's a girl. Keith. Women. Always women with you. Well? Larry. A Polish girl. Her father died over here when she was 16 and left her all alone. There was a mongrel living in the same house who married her, or pretended to. She's very pretty, Keith. He left her with a baby coming. She lost it, and nearly starved. Then another fellow took her on, and she lived with him 2 years, till that brute turned up again and made her go back to him. He used to beat her black and blue. He left her again when I met her. She was taking anybody then. He stops, passes his hand over his lips, looks up at Keith, and goes on defiantly. I never met a sweeter woman, or a truer, that I swear. Woman, she's only 20 now. When I went to her last night, that devil had found her out again. He came for me, a bullying, great, hulking brute. Look! He touches a dark mark on his forehead. I took his ugly throat, and when I let go... He stops, and his hands drop. Keith. Yes? Larry, in a smothered voice. Dead, Keith. I never knew till afterwards that she was hanging on to him to help me. Again he wrings his hands. Keith, in a hard, dry voice. What did you do then? Larry. We sat by it a long time. Keith. Well? Larry. Then I carried it on my back down the street, round a corner, to an archway. Keith. How far? Larry. About 50 yards. Keith. Did anyone see? Larry. No. Keith. What time? Larry. 3 a.m. Keith. And then? Larry. Went back to her. Keith. Why, in heaven's name? Larry. She was lonely and afraid. So was I, Keith. Keith. Where is this place? Larry. 42 Borough Square, Soho. Keith. And the archway? Larry. Corner of Glove Lane. Keith. Good God! Why, I saw it in the paper this morning. They were talking of it in the courts. He snatches the evening paper from his armchair and runs it over and reads. Here it is again. Body of a man was found this morning under an archway in Glove Lane. From marks about the throat, grave suspicion of foul play are entertained. The body had apparently been robbed. My God! Suddenly he turns. You saw this in the paper and dreamed it. Do you understand, Larry? You dreamed it. Larry, wistfully. If only I had, Keith. Keith makes a movement of his hands almost like his brother's. Keith. Did you take anything from the body? Larry, drawing an envelope from his pocket. This dropped out while we were struggling. Keith, snatching it and reading it. Patrick Wellen. Was this his name? Simon's Hotel, Ferrier Street, London. Stooping, he puts it in the fire. No, that makes me... He bends to pluck it out, stays his hand, and stamps it suddenly further in with his foot. What in God's name made you come here and tell me? Don't you know I'm within an ace of a judgeship? Larry, simply. Yes, you must know what I ought to do. I didn't mean to kill him, Keith. I love the girl. I love her. What shall I do? Keith. Love. Larry, in a flash. Love. That swinish brute. 1,000,000 creatures die every day, and not one of them deserves death as he did. But I feel it here, touching his heart. Such an awful clutch, Keith. Help me if you can, old man. I may be no good, but I've never hurt a fly if I could help it. He buries his face in his hands. Keith. Steady, Larry. Let's think it out. You weren't seen, you say? Larry. It's a dark place, and dead night. Keith. When did you leave the girl again? Larry. About 7. Keith. Where did you go? Larry. To my rooms. Keith. To Fitzroy Street? Larry. Yes. Keith. What have you done since? Larry. Sat there, thinking. Keith. Not been out? Larry. No. Keith. Not seen the girl? Larry shakes his head. Will she give you away? Larry. Never. Keith. Or herself hysteria? Larry. No. Keith. Who knows of your relations with her? Larry. No one. Keith. No one? Larry. I don't know who should, Keith. Keith. Did anyone see you go in last night when you first went to her? Larry. No, she lives on the ground floor. I've got keys. Keith. Give them to me. Larry takes 2 keys from his pocket and hands them to his brother. Larry, rising. I can't be cut off from her. Keith. What? A girl like that? Larry, with a flash. Yes, a girl like that. Keith, moving his hand to put down old emotion. What else have you that connects you with her? Larry. Nothing. Keith. In your rooms? Larry shakes his head. Photographs? Letters? Larry. No. Keith. Sure? Larry. Nothing. Keith. No one saw you going back to her? Larry shakes his head. Nor leaving in the morning? You can't be certain. Larry. I am. Keith. You were fortunate. Sit down again, man. I must think. He turns to the fire and leans his elbows on the mantelpiece and his head on his hands. Larry sits down again obediently. Keith. It's all too unlikely. It's monstrous. Larry, sighing it out. Yes. Keith. This Wallen, was it his first reappearance after an absence? Larry. Yes. Keith. How did he find out where she was? Larry. I don't know. Keith, brutally. How drunk were you? Larry. I was not drunk. Keith. How much had you drunk then? Larry. A little claret. Nothing. Keith. You say you didn't mean to kill him? Larry. God knows. Keith. That's something. Larry. He hit me. He holds up his hands. I didn't know I was so strong. Keith. She was hanging on to him, you say? That's ugly. Larry. She was scared for me. Keith. Do you mean she loves you? Larry, simply. Yes, Keith. Keith, brutally. Can a woman like that love? Larry, flashing out. By God, you are a stony devil. Why not? Keith, dryly. I'm trying to get at truth. If you want me to help, I must know everything. What makes you think she's fond of you? Larry, with a crazy laugh. Oh, you lawyer! Were you never in a woman's arms? Keith. I'm talking of love. Larry, fiercely. So am I. I tell you she's devoted. Did you ever pick up a lost dog? Well, she has the lost dog's love for me, and I for her. We picked each other up. I've never felt for another woman what I feel for her. She's been the saving of me. Keith, with a shrug. What made you choose that archway? Larry. It was the first dark place. Keith. Did his face look as if it had been strangled? Larry. Don't. Keith. Did it? Larry bows his head. Very disfigured? Larry. Yes. Keith. Did you look to see if his clothes were marked? Larry. No. Keith. Why not? Larry, in an outburst. I'm not made of iron like you. Why not? If you had done it? Keith, holding up his hand. You say he was disfigured. Would he be recognizable? Larry, wearily. I don't know. Keith. When she lived with him last, where was that? Larry. In Pimlico, I think. Keith. Not Soho? Larry shakes his head. How long has she been at this Soho place? Larry. Nearly a year. Keith. Living this life? Larry. Till she met me. Keith. Till she met you? And you believe? Larry, starting up. Keith! Keith, again raising his hand. Always in the same rooms? Larry, subsiding. Yes. Keith. What was he, a professional bully? Larry nods. Spending most of his time abroad, I suppose. Larry. I think so. Keith. Can you say if he was known to the police? Larry. I've never heard. Keith turns away and walks up and down. Then, stopping at Larry's chair, he speaks. Keith. Now listen, Larry. When you leave here, go straight home and stay there till I give you leave to go out again. Promise. Larry. I promise. Keith. Is your promise worth anything? Larry, with one of his flashes. Unstable as water, he shall not excel. Keith. Exactly. But if I'm to help you, you must do as I say. I must have time to think this out. Have you got money? Larry. Very little. Keith, grimly. Half-quarter day. Yes, your quarter's always spent by then. If you're to get away, never mind, I can manage the money. Larry, humbly. You're very good, Keith. You've always been very good to me. I don't know why. Keith, sardonically. Privilege of a brother. As it happens, I'm thinking of myself and our family. You can't indulge yourself in killing without bringing ruin. My God, I suppose you realize that you've made me an accessory after the fact. Me, King's Counsel, sworn to the service of the law, who, in a year or two, will have the trying of cases like yours. By heaven, Larry, you've surpassed yourself. Larry, bringing out a little box. I'd better have done with it. Keith. You fool! Give that to me. Larry, with a strange smile. No. He holds up a tablet between finger and thumb. White magic, Keith. Just one, and they may do what they like with you, and you won't know it. Snap your fingers at all the tortures. It's great comfort. Have one to keep by you? Keith. Come, Larry. Hand it over. Larry, replacing the box. Not quite. You've never killed a man, you see. He gives that crazy laugh. Do you remember that hammer when we were boys and you riled me up in the long room? I had luck then. I had luck in Naples once. I nearly killed the driver for beating his poor brute of a horse. But now, my God! He covers his face. Keith, touched, goes up and lays a hand on his shoulder. Keith. Come, Larry. Courage. Larry looks up at him. Larry. All right, Keith. I'll try. Keith. Don't go out. Don't drink. Don't talk. Pull yourself together. Larry, moving towards the door. Don't keep me longer than you can help, Keith. Keith. No, no. Courage. Larry reaches the door, turns as if to say something, finds no words, and goes. To the fire. Courage. My God, I shall need it. Curtain. Scene 2. At about 11 o'clock the following night at Wanda's room on the ground floor in Soho. In the light from one close-shaded electric bulb, the room is but dimly visible. A dying fire burns on the left. A curtained window in the center of the black wall. A door on the right. The furniture is plush-covered and commonplace, with a kind of shabby smartness. A couch, without back or arms, stands aslant between window and fire. On this Wanda is sitting, her knees drawn up under her, staring at the embers. She has on only her nightgown and a wrapper over it. Her bare feet are thrust into slippers. Her hands are crossed and pressed over her breast. She starts and looks up, listening. Her eyes are candid and startled, her face alabaster pale, and its pale brown hair, short and square-cut, curls toward her bare neck. The startled dark eyes and the faint rose of her lips are like color staining on a white mask. Footsteps, as of a policeman, very measured, pass on the pavement outside and die away. She gets up and steals to the window, draws one curtain aside so that a chink of the night is seen. She opens the curtain wider till the shape of a bare, witch-like tree becomes visible in the open space of the little square on the far side of the road. The footsteps are heard once more coming nearer. Wanda closes the curtains and cranes back. They pass and die again. She moves away and looking down at the floor between door and couch, as though seeing something there, shudders. Covers her eyes. Goes back to the couch and down again just as before, to stare at the embers. Again she is startled by noises of the outer door being opened. She springs up, runs and turns the light by a switch close to the door. By the glimmer of the fire she can just be seen standing by the dark window curtains, listening. There comes the sound of a subdued knocking on her door. She stands in breathless terror. The knocking is repeated. The sound of a latchkey in the door is heard. Her terror leaves her. The door opens. A man enters in a dark fur overcoat. Wanda, in a voice of breathless relief, with a rather foreign accent. "Oh, it's you, Larry. Why did you knock? I was so frightened. Come in." She crosses quickly and flings her arms round his neck, recoiling in a terror-stricken whisper. "Oh, who is it?" Keith, in a smothered voice. "A friend of Larry's. Don't be frightened." She has recoiled again to the window, and when he finds the switch and turns the light up, she is seen standing there holding her dark wrapper up to her throat, so that her face has an uncanny look of being detached from the body. Gently. "You needn't be afraid. I haven't come to do you harm. Quite the contrary." Holding up the keys. "Larry wouldn't have given me these, would he, if he hadn't trusted me?" Wanda does not move, staring like a spirit startled out of the flesh. After looking round him, "I'm sorry to have startled you." Wanda, in a whisper. "Who are you, please?" Keith. "Larry's brother." Wanda, with a sigh of utter relief, steals forward to the couch and sinks down. Keith goes up to her. "He told me." Wanda, clasping her hands round her knees. "Yes?" Keith. "An awful business." Wanda. "Yes, oh yes, awful, it is awful." Keith, staring round him again. "In this room?" Wanda. "Just where you are standing. I see him now, always falling." Keith, moved by the gentle despair in her voice. "You look very young. What's your name?" Wanda. "Wanda." Keith. "Are you fond of Larry?" Wanda. "I would die for him." A moment's silence. Keith. I've come to see what you can do to save him." Wanda, wistfully. "You would not deceive me. You are really his brother?" Keith. "I swear it." Wanda, clasping her hands. "If I can save him, won't you sit down?" Keith, drawing up a chair and sitting. "This man, your husband, before he came here the night before last, how long since you saw him?" Wanda. 18 months. Keith. "Does anyone about here know you are his wife?" Wanda. "No. I came here to live a bad life. Nobody know me. I am quite alone." Keith. "They've discovered who he was. You know that?" Wanda. "No. I have not dared to go out." Keith. "Well, they have, and they'll look for anyone connected with him, of course." Wanda. "He never let people think I was married to him. I don't know if I was, really. He went to an office and signed our names, but he was a wicked man. He treated many, I think, like me." Keith. "Did my brother ever see him before?" Wanda. "Never. And that man first went for him." Keith. "Yes, I saw the mark. Have you a servant?" Wanda. "No. A woman comes at 9 in the morning for an hour." Keith. "Does she know Larry?" Wanda. "No. He is always gone." Keith. "Friends? Acquaintances?" Wanda. "No. I am very quiet. Since I know your brother, I see no one, sir." Keith, sharply. "Do you mean that?" Wanda. "Oh, yes. I love him. Nobody come here but him for a long time now." Keith. "How long?" Wanda. 5 months. Keith. "So you have not been out since—" Wanda shakes her head. "What have you been doing?" Wanda, simply. "Crying." Pressing her hands to her breast. He is in danger because of me. I am so afraid for him. Keith, checking her emotion. Look at me. She looks at him. If the worst comes, and this man is traced to you, can you trust yourself not to give Larry away? Wanda, rising and pointing to the fire. Look, I have burned all the things he has given me, even his picture. Now I have nothing from him. Keith, who has risen too. Good. One more question. Do the police know you because of your life? She looks at him intently and shakes her head. You know where Larry lives? Wanda. Yes. Keith. You mustn't go there, and he mustn't come to you. She bows her head, then suddenly comes close to him. Wanda. Please do not take him from me altogether. I will be so careful. I will not do anything to hurt him. But if I cannot see him sometimes, I shall die. Please do not take him from me. She catches his hand and presses it desperately between her own. Keith. Leave that to me. I'm going to do all I can. Wanda, looking up into his face. But you will be kind? Suddenly she bends and kisses his hand. Keith draws his hand away, and she recoils a little humbly, looking up at him again. Suddenly she stands, rigid, listening. In a whisper. Listen, someone out there. She darts past him and turns out the light. There is a knock on the door. They are now close together between door and window. Whispering. Oh, who is it? Keith, under his breath. You said no one comes here but Larry. Wanda. Yes, and you have his keys. Oh, if it is Larry, I must open. Keith shrinks back against the wall. Wanda goes to the door, opening the door an inch. Yes, please, who? A thin streak of light from a bull's-eye lantern outside plays over the wall. A policeman's voice says, All right, miss. Your outer door's open. You ought to keep it shut after dark, you know. Wanda. Thank you, sir. The sound of retreating footsteps, of the outer door closing. Wanda shuts the door. A policeman. Keith, moving from the wall. Curse! I must have left that door. Suddenly turning up the light. You told me they didn't know you. Wanda, sighing. I did not think they did, sir. It is so long I was not out in the town, not since I had Larry. Keith gives her an intent look, then crosses to the fire. He stands there a moment looking down, then turns to the girl who has crept back to the couch. Keith, half to himself. After your life, who can believe? Look here, you drifted together and you'll drift apart, you know. Better for him to get away and make a clean cut of it. Wanda, uttering a little moaning sound. Oh, sir, may I not love because I have been bad? I was only 16 when that man spoiled me. If you knew. Keith. I'm thinking of Larry. With you his danger is much greater. There's a good chance as things are going. You may wreck it. And for what? For just a few months more of, well, you know. Wanda, standing at the head of the couch and touching her eyes with her hand. Oh, sir, look, it is true. He is my life. Don't take him away from me. Keith, moved and restless. You must know what Larry is. He'll never stick to you. Wanda, simply. He will, sir. Keith, energetically. The last man on earth to stick to anything, but for the sake of a whim he'll risk his life and the honor of all his family. I know him. Wanda. No, no, you do not. It is I who know him. Keith. Now. At any moment they may find out your connection with that man. So long as Larry goes on with you, he's tied to this murder, don't you see? Wanda, coming close to him. But he loves me. Oh, sir, he loves me. Keith. Larry has loved dozens of women. Wanda. Yes, but... Her face quivers. Keith, brusquely. Don't cry. If I give you money, will you disappear for his sake? Wanda, with a moan. It will be in the water, then. There will be no cruel men there. Keith. Ah, first Larry, then you. Come now, it's better for you both. A few months and you'll forget you ever met. Wanda, looking wildly up. I will go if Larry say I must, but not to live, no. Simply. I could not, sir. Keith, moved, is silent. I could not live without Larry, but is that for a girl like me, when she wants love? It is finish. Keith. I don't want you to go back to that life. Wanda. No, you do not care what I do. Why should you? I tell you I will go if Larry say I must. Keith. That is not enough. You know that. You must take it out of his hands. He will never give up his present for the sake of his future. If you're as fond of him as you say, you'll help to save him. Wanda, below her breath. Yes, oh yes, but do not keep him long from me, I beg. She sinks to the floor and clasps his knees. Keith. Well, well, get up. There is a tap on the window pane. Listen. A faint, peculiar whistle. Wanda, springing up. Larry, oh, thank God. She runs to the door, opens it, and goes out to bring him in. Keith stands waiting, facing the open doorway. Larry entering with Wanda just behind him. Larry. Keith! Keith, grimly. So much for your promise not to go out. Larry. I've been waiting in for you all day. I couldn't stand it any longer. Keith. Exactly. Larry. Well, what's the sentence, brother? Transportation for life and then to be fined £40. Keith. So you can joke, can you? Larry. Must. Keith. A boat leaves for the Argentine the day after tomorrow. You must go by it. Larry, putting his arms round Wanda, who is standing motionless with her eyes fixed on him. Together, Keith? Keith. You can't go together. I'll send her by the next boat. Larry. Swear? Keith. Yes. You're lucky they're on a false scent. Larry. What? Keith. You haven't seen it. Larry. I've seen nothing, not even a paper. Keith. They've taken up a vagabond who robbed the body. He pawned a snake-shaped ring, and they identified this Wallen by it. I've been down and seen him charged myself. Larry. With murder? Wanda. Faintly. Larry. Keith. He's in no danger. They always get the wrong man first. It'll do him no harm to be locked up a bit, hyena like that. Better in prison anyway than sleeping out under archways in this weather. Larry. What was he like, Keith? Keith. A little yellow, ragged, lame, unshaven scarecrow of a chap. They were fools to think he could have had the strength. Larry. What? In an odd voice. Why, I saw him, after I left you last night. Keith. You? Where? Larry. By the archway. Keith. You went back there? Larry. It draws you, Keith. Keith. You're mad, I think. Larry. I talked to him, and he said, Thank you for this little chat. It's worth more than money when you're down. Little grey man, like a shaggy animal. And a newspaper boy came up and said, That's right, governors. Here's where they found the body. Very spot. They ain't got him yet. He laughs, and the terrified girl presses herself against him. An innocent man. Keith. He's in no danger, I tell you. He could never have strangled. Why, he hadn't the strength of a kitten. Now, Larry, I'll take your berth tomorrow. Here's money. He brings out a pile of notes and puts them on the couch. You can make a new life of it out there together presently, in the sun. Larry, in a whisper. In the sun. A cup of wine and thou. Suddenly. How can I, Keith? I must see how it goes with that poor devil. Keith. Bosh! Dismiss it from your mind. There's not nearly enough evidence. Larry. Not? Keith. No. You've got your chance. Take it like a man. Larry, with a strange smile to the girl. Shall we, Wanda? Wanda. Oh, Larry. Larry, picking the notes up from the couch. Take them back, Keith. Keith. What? I tell you no jury would convict, and if they did, no judge would hang. A ghoul who can rob a dead body ought to be in prison. He did worse than you. Larry. It won't do, Keith. I must see it out. Keith. Don't be a fool. Larry. I've still got some kind of honor. If I clear out before I know, I shall have none, nor peace. Take them, Keith, or I'll put them in the fire. Keith, taking back the notes, bitterly. I suppose I may ask you not to be entirely oblivious of our name, or is that unworthy of your honour? Larry, hanging his head. I'm awfully sorry, Keith. Awfully sorry, old man. Keith, sternly. You owe it to me, to our name, to our dead mother, to do nothing anyway till we see what happens. Larry. I know. I'll do nothing without you, Keith. Keith, taking up his hat. Can I trust you? He stares hard at his brother. Larry. You can trust me. Keith. Swear? Larry. I swear. Keith. Remember nothing. Good night. Larry. Good night. Keith goes. Larry sits down on the couch and stares at the fire. The girl steals up and slips her arms about him. Larry. An innocent man. Wanda. Oh, Larry, but so are you. What did we want? To kill that man? Never. Oh, kiss me. Larry turns his face. She kisses his lips. I have suffered so, not seeing you. Don't leave me again. Don't. Stay here. Isn't it good to be together? Oh, poor Larry. How tired you look. Stay with me. I am so frightened all the time. So frightened they will take you away from me. Larry. Poor child. Wanda. No, no, don't look like that. Larry. You're shivering. Wanda. I will make up the fire. Love me, Larry. I want to forget. Larry. The poorest little wretch on God's earth, locked up for me, a little wild animal, locked up. There he goes, up and down in his cage. Don't you see him, looking for a place to gnaw his way through, little grey rat. He gets up and roams about. Wanda. No, no, I can't bear it. Don't frighten me more. He comes back and takes her in his arms. Larry. There, there. He kisses her closed eyes. Wanda, without moving. If we could sleep a little, wouldn't it be nice? Larry. Sleep? Wanda, raising herself. Promise to stay with me, to stay here for good, Larry. I will cook for you. I will make you so comfortable. They will find him innocent, and then, oh, Larry, in the sun right away, far from this horrible country. How lovely. Trying to get him to look at her. Larry. Larry, with a movement to free himself. To the edge of the world, and over. Wanda. No, 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 you don't want me to die, Larry, do you? I shall if you leave me. Let us be happy. Love me. Larry, with a laugh. Ah, let's be happy and shut out the sight of him. Who cares? Millions suffer for no mortal reason. Let's be strong, like Keith. No, I won't leave you, Wanda. Let's forget everything except ourselves. Suddenly. There he goes, up and down. Wanda, moaning. No, no, see, I will pray to the Virgin. She will pity us. She falls on her knees and clasps her hands, praying. Her lips move. Larry stands motionless with arms crossed, and on his face are yearning and mockery, love and despair. Larry, whispering. Pray for us. Bravo. Pray away. Suddenly the girl stretches out her arms and lifts her face with a look of ecstasy. What? Wanda. She is smiling. We will be happy soon. Larry, bending down to her. Poor child. When we die, Wanda, let's go together. We should keep each other warm out in the dark. Wanda, raising her hand to his face. Yes, oh yes, if you die, I could not go on living. Curtain. Scene 3. 2 months later. Wanda's room. Daylight is just beginning to fail of a January afternoon. The table is laid for a supper with decanters of wine. Wanda is sitting at the window looking out at the wintry trees of the square beyond the pavement. A newspaper boy's voice is heard coming nearer. Voice. Paper. Loveline murder. Trial and verdict. Receding. Verdict. Paper. Wanda throws up the window as if to call to him, checks herself, closes it, and runs to the door. She opens it, but recoils into the room. Keith is standing there. He comes in. Keith. Where's Larry? Wanda. He went to the trial. I could not keep him from it. The trial. Oh, what has happened, sir? Keith. Savagely. Guilty. Sentence of death. Fools. Idiots. Wanda. Of death. For a moment she seems about to swoon. Keith. Girl, it may all depend on you. Larry still living here? Wanda. Yes. Keith. I must wait for him. Wanda. Will you sit down, please? Keith, shaking his head. Are you ready to go away at any time? Wanda. Yes, always I am ready. Keith. And he? Wanda. Yes, but now, what will he do, that poor man? Keith. A graveyard thief. A ghoul. Wanda. Perhaps he was hungry. I have been hungry. You'll do things then that you would not. Larry has thought of him in prison so much all these weeks. Oh, what shall we do now? Keith. Listen, help me. Don't let Larry out of your sight. I must see how things go. They'll never hang this wretch. He grips her arms. Now we must stop Larry from giving himself up. He's fool enough. Do you understand? Wanda. Yes, but why has he not come in? Oh, if he have already. Keith, letting go her arms. My God, if the police come, find me here. He moves to the door. No, he wouldn't without seeing you first. He's sure to come. Watch him like a lynx. Don't let him go without you. Wanda, clasping her hands on her breast. I will try, sir. Keith. Listen. A key is heard in the lock. It's he. Larry enters. He is holding a great bunch of pink lilies and white narcissus. His face tells nothing. Keith looks from him to the girl, who stands motionless. Larry. Keith, so you've seen. Keith. The thing can't stand. I'll stop it somehow, but you must give me time, Larry. Larry, calmly. Still looking after your honor, Keith? Keith, grimly. Think my reasons what you like. Wanda, softly. Larry. Larry puts his arm round her. Larry. Sorry, old man. Keith. This man can and shall get off. I want your solemn promise that you won't give yourself up, not even go out till I've seen you again. Larry. I give it. Keith, looking from one to the other. By the memory of our mother, swear that. Larry, with a smile. I swear. Keith. I have your oath, both of you. Both of you. I'm going at once to see what can be done. Larry, softly. Good luck, brother. Keith goes out. Wanda, putting her hands on Larry's breast. What does it mean? Larry. Supper, child. I've had nothing all day. Put these lilies in water. She takes the lilies and obediently puts them into a vase. Larry pours wine into a deep-colored glass and drinks it off. We've had a good time, Wanda. Best time I've ever had these last 2 months, and nothing but the bill to pay. Wanda, clasping him desperately. Oh, Larry, Larry. Larry, holding her away to look at her. Take off those things and put on a bridal garment. Wanda. Promise me, wherever you go, I go too. Promise. Larry, you think I haven't seen all these weeks, but I have seen everything, all in your heart always. You cannot hide from me. I knew. Oh, if we might go away into the sun. Oh, Larry, couldn't we? She searches his eyes with hers, then, shuddering. Well, if it must be dark, I don't care if I may go in your arms. In prison we could not be together. I am ready. Only love me first. Don't let me cry before I go. Oh, Larry, will there be much pain? Larry, in a choked voice. No pain, my pretty. Wanda, with a little sigh. It is a pity. Larry. If you had seen him as I have, all day, being tortured, Wanda, we shall be out of it. The wine mounting to his head. We shall be free in the dark, free of their cursed inhumanities. I hate this world, I loathe it. I hate its God-forsaken savagery, its pride and smugness. Keith's world, all righteous will-power and success. We're no good here, you and I. We were cast out at birth, soft, will-less, better dead. No fear, Keith, I'm staying indoors. He pours wine into 2 glasses. Drink it up. Obediently Wanda drinks, and he also. Now go and make yourself beautiful. Wanda, seizing him in her arms. Oh, Larry. Larry, touching her face and hair. Hanged by the neck until he's dead, for what I did. Wanda takes a long look at his face, slips her arms from him, and goes out through the curtains below the fireplace. Larry feels in his pocket, brings out the little box, opens it, fingers the white tablets. Larry. 2 each, after food. He laughs and puts back the box. Oh, my girl. The sound of a piano playing a faint, festive tune is heard afar off. He mutters, staring at the fire. Flames flame, and flicker ashes. No more, no more. The moon is dead, and all the people in it. He sits on the couch with a piece of paper on his knees, adding a few words with a stylo pen to what is already written. The girl, in a silk wrapper, coming back through the curtains, watches him. Larry, looking up. It's all here. I've confessed. Reading. Please bury us together. Lawrence Darrant. January 28th, about 6 p.m. They'll find us in the morning. Come and have supper, my dear love. The girl creeps forward. He rises, puts his arm round her, and with her arm twined around him, smiling into each other's faces, they go to the table and sit down. The curtain falls for a few seconds to indicate the passage of 3 hours. When it rises again, the lovers are lying on the couch in each other's arms, the lilies strewn about them. The girl's bare arm is round Larry's neck. Her eyes are closed. His are open and sightless. There is no light but firelight. A knocking on the door and the sound of a key turned in the lock. Keith enters. He stands a moment bewildered by the half-light, then calls sharply, Larry, and turns up the light. Seeing the forms on the couch, he recoils a moment. Then, glancing at the table and empty decanters, goes up to the couch. Keith, muttering, asleep, drunk, ugh. Suddenly he bends, touches Larry, and springs back. What? He bends again, shakes him, and calls, Larry! Larry! Then, motionless, he stares down at his brother's open, sightless eyes. Suddenly he wets his finger and holds it to the girl's lip, then to Larry's. He bends and listens at their hearts, catches sight of the little box lying between them, and takes it up. My God! Then, raising himself, he closes his brother's eyes, and as he does so, catches sight of a paper pinned to the couch, detaches it, and reads, I, Lawrence Darrant, about to die by my own hand, confess that I... He reads on silently, in horror, finishes, letting the paper drop, and recoils from the couch onto a chair at the disheveled supper table. Aghast, he sits there. Suddenly he mutters, If I leave that there, my name, my whole future. He springs up, takes up the paper again, and again reads, My God, it's ruined. He makes as if to tear it across, stops, and looks down at those two, covers his eyes with his hand, drops the paper and rushes to the door. But he stops there and comes back, magnetized as it were by that paper. He takes it up once more and thrusts it into his pocket. The footsteps of a policeman pass, slow and regular, outside. His face crisps and quivers. He stands listening till they die away. Then he snatches the paper from his pocket and goes past the foot of the couch to the fore. All my... No, let him hang. He thrusts the paper into the fire, stamps it down with his foot, watches it writhe and blacken. Then, suddenly clutching his head, he turns to the bodies on the couch. Panting and like a man demented, he recoils past the head of the couch, and rushing to the window, draws the curtains and throws the window up for air. Out in the darkness rises the witch-like skeleton tree, where a dark shape seems hanging. Keith starts back. "What's that? What?" He shuts the window and draws the dark curtains across it again. Fool! Nothing! Clenching his fists, he draws himself up, steadying himself with all his might. Then slowly he moves to the door, stands a second like a carved figure, his face hard as stone. Deliberately he turns out the light, opens the door, and goes. The still bodies lie there before the fire, which is licking at the last blackened wafer. Curtain. End of The First and the Last, by John Galsworthy. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read and recorded by William Coon, September 2006. A Marriage Has Been Arranged, by Alfred Sutro. The persons of the play: Mr. Harrison Croxted, Lady Aileen DeVoe. Scene: the conservatory of No. 300 Grosvenor Square. Hour: close on midnight. A ball is in progress, and dreamy waltz music is heard in the distance. Lady Aileen DeVoe enters, leaning on the arm of Mr. Harrison Croxted. Lady Aileen is a tall, exquisitely gowned girl, of the conventional and much admired type of beauty. Put her in any drawing-room in the world, and she would at once be recognized as a high-born Englishwoman. She has in her, in embryo, all those excellent qualities that go to make a great lady: the icy stare, the haughty movement of the shoulder, the disdainful arch of the lip. She has also, but only an experienced observer would notice it, something of wistfulness, something that speaks of a sore and wounded heart, though it is sufficiently evident that this organ is kept under admirable control. A girl who has been placed in a position of life where artificiality rules, who has been taught to be artificial and has thoroughly learned her lesson, yet one who would unhesitatingly know the proper things to do, did a camel bolt with her in the desert, or an Eastern potentate invite her to become his 257th wife. In a word, a lady of complete self-possession and magnificent control. Mr. Croxted is a big, burly man of 40 or so, and of the kind to whom the ordinary West End butler would consider himself perfectly justified in declaring that her ladyship was not at home. And yet his evening clothes sit well on him, and there is a certain air of command about the man that would have made the butler uncomfortable. That functionary would have excused himself by declaring that Mr. Croxted didn't look a gentleman, and perhaps he doesn't. His walk is rather a slouch. He has a way of keeping his hands in his pockets and of jerking out his sentences, a way, above all, of seeming perfectly indifferent to the comfort of the people he happens to be addressing. The impression he gives is one of power, not of refinement, and the massive face, with its heavy lines and eyes that are usually veiled, seems to give no clue whatever to the character of the man within. The couple break apart when they enter the room. Lady Aileen is the least bit nervous, though she shows no trace of it. Mr. Croxted absolutely imperturbable and undisturbed. Croxted, looking around. Ah, this is the place. Very quiet, retired, romantic, etc. Music in the distance, all very appropriate and sentimental. She leaves him and sits quietly fanning herself. He stands, looking at her. You seem perfectly calm, Lady Aileen. Aileen, sitting. Conservatories are not unusual appendages to a ballroom, Mr. Croxted, nor is this conservatory unlike other conservatories. Croxted, turning to her. I wonder why women are always so evasive. Aileen. With your permission, we will not discuss the sex. You and I are too old to be cynical and too young to be appreciative. And besides, it is a rule of mine, whenever I sit out a dance, that my partner shall avoid the subjects of women and golf. Croxted. You limit the area of conversation, but then in this particular instance, I take it, we have not come here to talk. Aileen coldly. I beg your pardon. Croxted, sitting beside her. Lady Aileen, they are dancing a cotillion in there, so we have half an hour before us. We shall not be disturbed, for the Duchess, your aunt, has considerately stationed her aged companion in the corridor with instructions to ward off intruders. Aileen, very surprised. Mr. Croxted! Croxted, looking hard at her. Didn't you know? Aileen turns aside, embarrassed. That's right, of course you did. Don't you know why I have brought you here? That's right, of course you do. The Duchess, your aunt, and the Marchioness, your mother, observe how fondly my tongue trips out the titles, smiled sweetly on us as we left the ballroom. There will be a notice in the Morning Post tomorrow. A marriage has been arranged between... Aileen, bewildered and offended. Mr. Croxted, this is... Croxted, always in the same quiet tone. Because I have not yet proposed, you mean? Of course I intend to, Lady Aileen, only as I know that you will accept me. Aileen, in icy tones, as she rises. Let us go back to the ballroom. Croxted, quite undisturbed. Oh, please, that won't help us, you know. Do sit down. I assure you I have never proposed before, so that naturally I am a trifle nervous. Of course I know that we are only supers, really, without much of a speaking part, but the spirit moves me to gag in the absence of the stage manager, who is, let us say, the Duchess. Aileen. I have heard of the new humour, Mr. Croxted, though I confess I have never understood it. This may be an exquisite example. Croxted. By no means. I am merely trying to do the right thing, though perhaps not the conventional one. Before making you the formal offer of my hand and fortune, which amounts to a little over 3 millions. Aileen, fanning herself. How people exaggerate. Between 6 and 7, I heard. Croxted. Only 3 at present, but we must be patient. Before throwing myself at your feet, metaphorically, I am anxious that you should know something of the man whom you are about to marry. Aileen. That is really most considerate. Croxted. I have the advantage of you, you see, inasmuch as you have many dear friends who have told me all about you. Aileen, with growing exasperation, but keeping very cool. Indeed. Croxted. I am aware, for instance, that this is your 9th season. Aileen, snapping her fan. You are remarkably well informed. Croxted. I have been told that again tonight 3 times by charming young women who vowed that they loved you. Now, as I have no dearest friends, it is unlikely that you will have heard anything equally definite concerning myself. I propose to enlighten you. Aileen, satirically. The story of your life. How thrilling. Croxted. I trust you may find it so. He sits and pauses for a moment, then begins very quietly. Lady Aileen, I am a self-made man, as the foolish phrase has it, a man whose early years were spent in savage and desolate places, where the devil had much to say, a man in whom whatever there once had been of natural kindness was very soon kicked out. I was poor and lonely for 32 years. I have been rich and lonely for 10. My millions have been made honestly enough, but poverty and wretchedness have left their mark on me, and you will find very few men with a good word to say for Harrison Croxted. I have no polish or culture or tastes. Art wearies me. Literature sends me to sleep. Aileen. When you come to the chapter of your personal deficiencies, Mr. Croxted, please remember that they are sufficiently evident for me to have already observed them. Croxted, without a trace of annoyance. That is true. I will pass, then, to more intimate matters. In a little township in Australia, a horrible place where there was gold, I met a woman whom I loved. She was what is technically known as a bad woman. She ran away with another man. I tracked them to Texas, and in a mining camp there I shot the man. I wanted to take the woman back, but she refused. That has been my solitary love affair, and I shall never love any woman again as I loved her. I think that is all that I have to tell you. And now, will you marry me, Lady Aline? Aline, very steadily facing him. Not if you were the last man in this world, Mr. Croxted. Croxted, with a pleasant smile. At least that is emphatic. Aline. See, I will give you confidence for confidence. This is, as you suggest, my 9th season, living in an absurd milieu where marriage with a wealthy man is regarded as the one aim in life. I have, during the past few weeks, done all that lay in my power to wring a proposal from you. Croxted. I appreciate your sincerity. Aline. Perhaps the knowledge that other women were doing the same lent a little zest to the pursuit, which otherwise would have been very dreary, for I confess that your personality did not especially appeal to me. Croxted, cheerfully. Thank you very much. Aline. Not at all. Indeed, this room being the palace of truth, I will admit that it was only by thinking hard of your 3 millions that I have been able to conceal the weariness I have felt in your society. And now, will you marry me, Mr. Croxted? Croxted, serenely. I fancy that's what we're here for, isn't it? Aline, stamping her foot. I have of course been debarred from the disreputable amours of which you linger so fondly, but I loved a soldier cousin of mine, and would have run away with him had my mother not packed me off in time. He went to India, and I stayed here, but he is the only man I have loved or ever shall love. Further, let me tell you I am 28. I have always been poor. I hate poverty, and it has soured me no less than you. Dress is the thing in life I care for most, vulgarity my chief abomination, and to be frank, I consider you the most vulgar person I have ever met. Will you still marry me, Mr. Croxted? Croxted, with undiminished cheerfulness. Why not? Aline. This is an outrage. Am I a horse, do you think, or a ballet dancer? Do you imagine I will sell myself to you for your 3 millions? Croxted. Logic, my dear Lady Aline, is evidently not one of your more special possessions, for, had it not been for my somewhat eccentric preliminaries, you would have accepted me, would you not? Aline, embarrassed. I. Croxted. If I had said to you timidly, Lady Aline, I love you, I am a simple, unsophisticated person, will you marry me? You would have answered, Yes, Harrison, I will. Aline. It is a mercy to have escaped marrying a man with such a Christian name as Harrison. Croxted. It has been in the family for generations, you know, but it is a strange thing that I am always called Harrison, that no one ever adopts the diminutive. Aline. That does not surprise me. We have no pet name for the east wind. Croxted. The possession of millions, you see, Lady Aline, puts you into eternal quarantine. It's a kind of yellow fever, with the difference that people are perpetually anxious to catch your complaint. But we digress. To return to the question of our marriage. Aline. I beg your pardon? Croxted. I presume that it is arranged? Aline, haughtily. Mr. Croxted, let me remind you that frankness has its limits. Exceeding these, it is apt to degenerate into impertinence. Be good enough to conduct me to the ballroom. She moves to the door. Croxted. You have 5 sisters, I believe, Lady Aline? Aline stops short. All younger than yourself, all marriageable, and all unmarried? Aline hangs her head and is silent. Croxted. Your father? Aline, fiercely. Not a word of my father. Croxted. Your father is a gentleman. The breed is rare and very fine when you get it. But he is exceedingly poor. People marry for money nowadays, and your mother will be very unhappy if this marriage of ours falls through. Aline, moving a step towards him. Is it to oblige my mother, then, that you desire to marry me? Croxted. Well, no. But you see I must marry someone, in mere self-defence, And honestly, I think you will do at least as well as anyone else. Aileen bursts out laughing. That strikes you as funny? Aileen. If you had the least grain of chivalrous feeling, you would realize that the man who could speak to a woman as you have spoken to me. She pauses. Crockstead. Yes? Aileen. I leave you to finish the sentence. Crockstead. Thank you. I will finish it my own way. I will say that when a woman deliberately tries to wring an offer of marriage from a man whom she does not love, she deserves to be spoken to as I have spoken to you, Lady Aileen. Aileen, scornfully. Love? What has love to do with marriage? Crockstead. That remark rings hollow. You have been good enough to tell me of your cousin whom you did love. Aileen. Well? Crockstead. And with whom you would have eloped had your mother not prevented you. Aileen. I most certainly should. Crockstead. So you see that at one period of your life you thought differently. You were very fond of him? Aileen. I have told you. Crockstead, meditatively. If I had been he, mother or no mother, money or no money, I would have carried you off. I fancy it must be pleasant to be loved by you, Lady Aileen. Aileen, dropping a mock curtsy as she sits on the sofa. You do me too much honor. Crockstead, still thoughtful, moving about the room. Next to being king, it is good to be maker of kings. Where is this cousin now? Aileen. In America, but might I suggest that we have exhausted the subject? Crockstead. Do you remember your Arabian Nights, Lady Aileen? Aileen. Vaguely. Crockstead. You have at least not forgotten that sublime Caliph Haroun al-Rashid? Aileen. Oh, no. But why? Crockstead. We millionaires are the Caliphs today, and we command more faithful than ever bowed to them, and, like that old scoundrel Haroun, we may at times permit ourselves a respectable impulse. What is your cousin's address? Aileen. Again I ask, why? Crockstead. I will put him in a position to marry you. Aileen, in extreme surprise. What? She rises. Crockstead. Oh, don't be alarmed. I'll manage it pleasantly. I'll give him tips, shares, speculate for him, make him a director of one or two of my companies. He shall have an income of 4,000 a year. You can live on that. Aileen. You are not serious. Crockstead. Oh, yes, and though men may not like me, they always trust my word. You may. Aileen. And why will you do this thing? Crockstead. Call it caprice. Call it a mere vulgar desire to let my magnificence dazzle you. Call it the less vulgar desire to know that my money has made you happy with the man you love. Aileen. That is generous. Crockstead. I remember an old poem I learnt at school, which told how Frederick the Great coveted a mill that adjoined a favourite estate of his. But the miller refused to sell. Frederick could have turned him out, of course. There was not very much public opinion in those days, but he respected the miller's firmness, and left him in solid possession. And mark that at the very same time he annexed, in other words stole, the province of Silesia. Aileen. Ah. Crockstead, moving to the fireplace. Ce sont le jeu le prince, il respectant le meunier, is voilà une Provence. The music stops. Aileen. You speak French? Crockstead. I am fond of it. It is the true and native language of insincerity. Aileen. And yet you seem sincere. Crockstead. I am permitting myself that luxury tonight. I am uncorking, let us say, the one bottle of 47 port left in my cellar. Aileen. You are not quite fair to yourself, perhaps. Crockstead. Do not let this action of mine cause you too suddenly to alter your opinion. The verdict you pronounced before was, on the whole, just. Aileen. What verdict? Crockstead. I was the most unpleasant person you ever had met. Aileen. That was an exaggeration. Crockstead. The most repulsive. Aileen quickly. I did not say that. Crockstead. And who prided himself on his repulsiveness? Very true in the main, and yet consider, my wealth dates back 10 years. Till then I had known hunger and every kind of sorrow and despair. I had stretched out longing arms to the world, but not a heart opened to me. And suddenly, when the taste of men's cruelty was bitter in my mouth, capricious fortune snatched me from abject poverty and gave me delirious wealth. I was ploughing a barren field and flung up a nugget. From that moment gold dogged my footsteps. I enriched the few friends I had. They turned howlingly from me because I did not give them more. I showered money on whoever sought it of me. They cursed me because it was mine to give. In my poverty there had been the bond of common sorrow between me and my fellows. In my wealth I stand alone, a modern Ishmael, with every man's hand against me. Aileen, gently. Why do you tell me this? Crockstead. Because I am no longer asking you to marry me, because you are the first person in all these years who has been truthful and frank with me, and because perhaps in the happiness that will, I trust, be yours, I want you to think kindly of me. She puts out her hand. He takes it. And now, shall we return to the ballroom? The music has stopped. They must be going to supper. Aileen. What shall I tell to the Marchioness, my mother, and the Duchess, my aunt? Crockstead. You will acquaint those noble ladies with the fact of your having refused me. They have both risen and move up the room together. Aileen. I shall be a 9 days' wonder. And how do you propose to carry out your little scheme? Crockstead. I will take Saturday's boat. You will give me a line to your cousin. I had better state the case plainly to him, perhaps. Aileen. That demands consideration. Crockstead. And I will tell you what you shall do for me in return. Find me a wife. Aileen. I? Crockstead. You. I beg it on my knees. I give you carte blanche. I undertake to propose with my eyes shut to the woman you shall select. Aileen. And will you treat her to the little preliminaries with which you have favoured me? Crockstead. No, I said those things to you because I liked you. Aileen. And you don't intend to like the other one? Crockstead. I will marry her. I can trust you to find me a loyal and intelligent woman. Aileen. In society? Crockstead. For preference. She will be better versed in spending money than a governess or country parson's daughter. Aileen. But why this voracity for marriage? Crockstead. Lady Aileen, I am hunted, pestered, worried, persecuted. I have settled 2 breach of promise actions already, though heaven knows I did no more than remark it was a fine day or inquire after the lady's health. If you do not help me, some energetic woman will capture me, I feel it, and bully me for the rest of my days. I raise a despairing cry to you, find me a wife. Aileen. Do you desire the lady to have any special qualifications? Crockstead. No, the home-grown article will do. One thing, though, I should like her to be merciful. Aileen. I don't understand. Crockstead. I have a vague desire to do something with my money. My wife might help me. I should like her to have pity. Aileen. Pity? Crockstead. In the midst of her wealth, I should wish her to be sorry for those who are poor. Aileen. Yes. And as regards the rest? Crockstead. The rest I leave to you, with absolute confidence. You will help me. Aileen. I will try. My choice is to be final? Crockstead. Absolutely. Aileen. I have an intimate friend. I wonder whether she would do. Crockstead. Tell me about her. Aileen. She and I made our debut the same season. Like myself, she has hitherto been her mother's despair. Crockstead. Because she has not yet. Aileen. Married? Yes. Oh, if men knew how hard the lot is of the portionless girl, who has to sit and smile and wait, with a very desolate heart, they would think less unkindly of her, perhaps. She smiles. But I am digressing too. Crockstead. Tell me more of your friend. Aileen. She is outwardly hard and a trifle bitter, but I fancy sunshine would thaw her. There has not been much happiness in her life. Crockstead. Would she marry a man she did not love? Aileen. If she did, you would not respect her? Crockstead. I don't say that. She will be your choice, and therefore deserving of confidence. Is she handsome? Aileen. Well, no. Crockstead, with a quick glance at her. That's a pity, but we can't have everything. Aileen. No. There is one episode in her life that I feel she would like you to know. Crockstead. If you are not betraying a confidence. Aileen, looking down. No. She loved a man, years ago, very dearly. They were too poor to marry, but they vowed to wait. Within 6 months she learned that he was engaged. Crockstead. Ah. Aileen. To a fat and wealthy widow. Crockstead. The old story. Aileen. Who was touring through India and had been made love to by every unmarried officer in the regiment. She chose him. Crockstead. India? He moves toward her. Aileen. Yes. Crockstead. I have an idea that I shall like your friend. He takes her hand in his. Aileen. I shall be careful to tell her all that you said to me at the beginning. Crockstead. It is quite possible that my remarks may not apply after all. Aileen. But I believe myself, from what I know of you, that if she marries you, it will not be, altogether, for your money. Crockstead. Listen. They're playing God Save the King. Will you be my wife, Aileen? Aileen. Yes. Harry. He takes her in his arms and kisses her. Curtain. End of A Marriage Has Been Arranged by Alfred Sutro. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Swan Song by Anton Chekhov, with Rosalind Wills as Svietlovidov and Kirsten Ferreri as Ivanich. The scene is laid on the stage of a country theater at night after the play. To the right, a row of rough, unpainted doors leading into the dressing rooms. To the left and in the background, the stage is encumbered with all sorts of rubbish. In the middle of the stage is an overturned stool. Svietlovidov, with a candle in his hand, comes out of a dressing room and laughs.
Well, this is funny. Here's a good joke. I fell asleep in my dressing room when the play was over, and there I was, calmly snoring after everybody else had left the theater. I'm a foolish old man, a poor old dodderer. I had been drinking again, and so I fell asleep in there, sitting up. That was clever. Good for you, old boy. Yegorka! Petrushka, where the devil are you? Petrushka! Scoundrels must be asleep, and an earthquake wouldn't wake them now. Yegorka! Not a sound, only echoes answer me. I gave Yegorka and Petrushka each a tip today, and now they have disappeared without leaving a trace behind them. The rascals have gone off, have probably locked up the theater. I'm drunk. Oh, the play tonight was for my benefit. It's disgusting to think how much beer and wine I poured down my throat in honor of the occasion. Gracious. My body is burning all over. I feel as if I had 20 tongues in my mouth. It's horrid, idiotic. This poor old sinner is drunk again and doesn't even know what he's been celebrating. Ah, my head is splitting. I'm shivering all over. I feel as dark and cold inside as a cellar. Even if I don't mind ruining my health, I ought at least to remember my age, old idiot that I am. Yes, my old age. It's no use. I can play the fool and brag and pretend to be young, but my life is really over now. I kiss my hand to the 68 years that have gone by. I'll never see them again. I've drained the bottle. Only a few little drops are left at the bottom. Nothing but the dregs. Yes, that's the case, Vasily, old boy. The time has come for you to rehearse the part of a mummy. Whether you like it or not, death is on its way to you. It is strange, though, that I've been on the stage now for 45 years, and this is the first time I've seen a theater at night, after the lights have been put out. First time. How dark it is. I can't see a thing. Oh, yes, I can just make out the prompter's box in his desk. The rest is in pitch darkness, a black, bottomless pit, like a grave, in which death itself might be hiding. How cold it is. The wind blows out of the empty theater as though out of a stone flue. What a place for ghosts. The shivers are running up and down my back. Yegorka! Petrushka! Where are you both? What on earth makes me think of such gruesome things here? I must give up drinking. I'm an old man. I shan't live much longer. At 68, people go to church and prepare for death, but here I am, heavens, a profane old drunkard in this fool's dress. I'm simply not fit to look at. I must go and change it at once. This is a dreadful place. I should die of fright sitting here all night.
Svyatlovodov goes toward his dressing room. At the same time, Ivanitch, in a long white coat, comes out of the dressing room.
Who are you? What do you want? Who are you?
It is I, sir.
Who are you?
It is I, sir, the prompter, Nikita Ivanitch. It is I, master. It is I.
Heavens, who are you? It is you, Nikitushka. What are you doing here?
I spend my nights here in the dressing rooms. Only please be good enough not to tell Alexei Fomitch, sir. I have nowhere else to spend the night. Indeed, I haven't.
Ah, it is you, Nikitushka, is it? Just think, the audience called me out 16 times. They brought me 3 wreaths and lots of other things, too. They were all wild with enthusiasm. And yet not a soul came when it was all over to wake the poor drunken old man and take him home. And I am an old man, Nikitushka. I am 68 years old, and I am ill. I haven't the heart left to go on. Don't go away, Nikitushka. I am old and helpless, and I feel it is time for me to die. Oh, it is dreadful, dreadful.
Dear master, it's time for you to go home, sir.
I won't go home. I have no home. None.
Oh, dear. Have you forgotten where you live?
I won't go there. I won't. I'm all alone there. I have nobody, Nikitushka. No wife, no children. I am like the wind blowing across the lonely fields. I shall die, and no one will remember me. It is awful to be alone. No one to cheer me, no one to caress me, no one to help me to bed when I'm drunk. Whom do I belong to? Who needs me? Who loves me? Not a soul, Nikitushka.
Your audience loves you, master.
My audience has gone home. They are all asleep and have forgotten their old clown. No, nobody needs me. Nobody loves me. I have no wife, no children.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear, don't be so unhappy about it.
But I am a man. I am still alive. Warm red blood is tingling in my veins, the blood of noble ancestors. I am an aristocrat, Nikitushka. I served in the army, in the artillery, before I fell as low as this. And what a fine young chap I was. Handsome, daring, eager. Where has it all gone? What has become of those old days? There's the pit that has swallowed them all. I remember it all now. 45 years of my life lie buried there. And what a life, Nikitushka. I can see it as clearly as I see your face. The ecstasy of youth, faith, passion, the love of women. Women, Nikitushka.
It's time you went to sleep, sir.
When I first went on the stage, in the first glow of passionate youth, I remember a woman loved me for my acting. She was beautiful, graceful as a poplar, young, innocent, pure, and radiant as a summer dawn. Her smile could charm away the darkest night. I remember I stood before her once, as I am now standing before you. She had never seemed so lovely to me as she did then. She spoke to me with her eyes, such a look. I shall never forget it. No, not even in the grave. So tender, so soft, so deep, so bright and young. Enraptured, intoxicated, I fell on my knees before her. I begged for my happiness, and she said, "Give up the stage. Give up the stage. Do you understand? She could love an actor, but marry him? Never." I was acting that day, I remember. I had a foolish clown's part, and as I acted, I felt my eyes being opened. I saw that the worship of the art I had held so sacred was a delusion and an empty dream, that I was a slave, a fool, the plaything of the idleness of strangers. I understood my audience at last, and since that day I have not believed in their applause, or in their wreaths, or in their enthusiasm. Yes, Nikitushka, the people applaud me. They buy my photograph, but I am a stranger to them. They don't know me. I am as the dirt beneath their feet. They are willing enough to meet me, but allow a daughter or a sister to marry me, an outcast? Never. I have no faith in them. No faith in them.
Oh, sir. You look so dreadfully pale. You're frightening me to death. Come, go home. Have mercy on me.
I saw through it all that day, and the knowledge was dearly bought. Nikitushka, after that, when that girl... Well, I began to wander aimlessly about, living from day to day without looking ahead. I took the part of buffoons and low comedians, letting my mind go to wreck. But I was a great artist once, till little by little I threw away my talents, played the motley fool, lost my looks, lost the power of expressing myself, and became in the end a merry andrew instead of a man. I have been swallowed up in that great black pit. I never felt it before, but tonight, when I woke up, I looked back, and there behind me lay 68 years. I've just found out what it is to be old. It's all over. All over.
Oh, there, dear master. Be quiet. Gracious. Petrushka, Yegorka.
But what a genius I was. You cannot imagine what power I had, what eloquence, how graceful I was, how tender, how many strings quivered in this breast. It chokes me to think of it. Listen now, wait, let me catch my breath. There. Now listen to this. The shade of bloody Ivan now returning fans through my lips rebellion to a flame. I am the dead Dmitri. In the burning Boris shall perish on the throne I claim. Enough! The heir of Tsars shall not be seen kneeling to yonder haughty Polish queen. Is that bad, eh? Wait now. Here's something from King Lear. Sky is black, see, rain is pouring down, thunder roars, lightning splits the whole sky, and then, listen. Blow, winds, and crack your cheeks. Rage, blow, you cataracts and hurricanos. Spout till you have drenched our steeples. Drown the cocks. You sulphurous and thought-executing fires. Vaunt couriers of oak-cleaving thunderbolts. Singe my white head. And thou, all-shaking thunder, strike flat the thick rotundity of the world. Crack nature's molds, all Germans spill at once, that make ungrateful man. Now the part of the fool. Come, take the fool's part. Be quick, I can't wait.
Nuncle. Court holy water in a dry house is better than this rain-water out a door. Good nuncle, in. Ask thy daughter's blessing. Here's a knight pities neither wise men nor fools.
Rumble thy bellyful. Spit fire, spout rain. Nor rain, wind, thunder, fire are my daughters. I tax not you, you elements, with unkindness. I never gave you kingdom. Called you children. Ah, there is strength, there is talent for you. I'm a great artist. Now then, here's something else of the same kind to bring back my youth to me. For instance, take this, from Hamlet. I'll begin. Let me see, how does it go? Oh, yes, this is it. Oh, the recorders. Let me see one. To withdraw with you. Why do you go about to recover the wind of me as if you would drive me into a toil?
Oh, my lord, if my duty be too bold, my love is too unmannerly.
I do not well understand that. Will you play upon this pipe?
My lord, I cannot.
I pray you.
No, believe me, I cannot.
I do beseech you.
I know no touch of it, my lord.
'Tis as easy as lying. Cover these vantages with your finger and thumb, give it breath with your mouth, and it will discourse most eloquent music. Look you, these are the stops.
But these I cannot command to any utterance of harmony. I have not the skill.
Why, look you, how unworthy a thing you make of me. You would play upon me, you would seem to know my stops, you would pluck out the heart of my mystery, you would sound me from my lowest note to the top of my compass, and there is much music, excellent voice in this little organ, yet cannot you make it speak? 'Sblood, do you think I am easier to be played on than a pipe? Call me what instrument you will, though you can fret me, you cannot play upon me. Ah, bravo, bravo, encore! Where the devil is there any old age in that? I'm not old, that's all nonsense. A torrent of strength rushes over me. This is life, freshness, youth. Old age and genius can't exist together. You seem to be struck dumb, Nikitushka. Wait a second, let me come to my senses again. Oh, good Lord. Now then, listen. Did you ever hear such tenderness, such music? Shh, softly. The moon had set. There was not any light, save of the lonely legioned watch-stars, pale in outer air, and what by fits made bright, hot oleanders in a rosy veil, searched by the lamping fly, whose little spark went in and out like passion's bashful hope. What's that?
There are Petrushka and Yegorka coming back. Yes, you have genius. Oh, genius, my master.
Come here to me, boys. Let us go get dressed. I'm not old. All that's foolishness. Nonsense. What are you crying for, you poor old granny, you? What's the matter now? This won't do. There. This won't do at all. Come, old man, don't stare so. What makes you stare like that? There, don't cry. Where there is art and genius, there can never be such things as old age or loneliness or sickness. And death itself is half... No, Nikitushka, it's all over for us now. What sort of a genius am I? I'm like a squeezed lemon, a cracked bottle, and you are the old rat of the theatre, a prompter. Come on. I'm no genius. I'm only fit to be in the suite of Fortinbras, and even for that I am too old. Yes. Do you remember those lines from Othello, Nikitushka? Farewell the tranquil mind, farewell content. Farewell the plumed troops and the big wars that make ambition virtue. Oh, farewell. Farewell the neighing steed and the shrill trump, the spirit-stirring drum, the ear-piercing fife, the royal banner and all quality, pride, pomp, and circumstance of glorious war.
Oh, you're a genius. A genius.
And again this. Away, the moor is dark beneath the moon. Rapid clouds have drunk the last pale beam of even. Away, the gathering winds will call the darkness soon, and profoundest midnight shroud the serene lights of heaven.
They go out together. The curtain falls slowly. End of Swan Song by Anton Chekhov. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read and recorded by William Coon, September 2006. Trifles by Susan Glaspell. Cast of characters: George Henderson, County Attorney; Henry Peters, Sheriff; Lewis Hale, a neighboring farmer; Mrs. Peters, Mrs. Hale. Scene: the kitchen is the now abandoned farmhouse of John Wright, a gloomy kitchen, and left without having been put in order. Unwashed pans under the sink, a loaf of bread outside the bread box, a dish towel on the table, other signs of incompleted work. At the rear the outer door opens and the sheriff comes in, followed by the county attorney and Hale. The sheriff and Hale are men in middle life. The county attorney is a young man. All are much bundled up and go at once to the stove. They are followed by the two women, the sheriff's wife first. She is a slight, wiry woman, a thin, nervous face. Mrs. Hale is larger and would ordinarily be called more comfortable looking, but she is disturbed now and looks fearfully about as she enters. The women have come in slowly and stand close together near the door. County Attorney, rubbing his hands. This feels good. Come up to the fire, ladies. Mrs. Peters, after taking a step forward. I'm not cold. Sheriff, unbuttoning his overcoat and stepping away from the stove as if to mark the beginning of official business. Now, Mr. Hale, before we move things about, you explain to Mr. Henderson just what you saw when you came here yesterday morning. County Attorney. By the way, has anything been moved? Are things just as you left them yesterday? Sheriff, looking about. It's just the same. When it dropped below 0 last night, I thought I'd better send Frank out this morning to make a fire for us. No use getting pneumonia with a big case on. But I told him not to touch anything except the stove. And you know Frank. County Attorney. Somebody should have been left here yesterday. Sheriff. Oh, yesterday, when I had to send Frank to Morris Center for that man who went crazy. I want you to know I had my hands full yesterday. I knew you could get back from Omaha by today, and as long as I went over everything here myself. County Attorney. Well, Mr. Hale, tell just what happened when you came here yesterday morning. Hale. Harry and I started to town with a load of potatoes. We came along the road from my place, and as I got here, I said, I'm going to see if I can't get John Wright to go in with me on a party telephone. I spoke to Wright about it once before, and he put me off, saying folks talk too much anyway, and all he asked was peace and quiet. I guess you know about how much he talked himself, but I thought maybe if I went to the house and talked about it before his wife, though I said to Harry that I didn't know as what his wife wanted made much difference to John. County Attorney. Let's talk about that later, Mr. Hale. I do want to talk about that, but tell now just what happened when you got to the house. Hale. I didn't hear or see anything. I knocked at the door, and still it was all quiet inside. I knew they must be up. It was past 8 o'clock. So I knocked again, and I thought I heard somebody say, come in. I wasn't sure. I'm not sure yet, but I opened the door, this door, indicating the door by which the two women were still standing. And there in that rocker, pointing to it, sat Mrs. Wright. They all look at the rocker. County Attorney. What was she doing? Hale. She was rocking back and forth. She had her apron in her hand and was kind of pleating it. County Attorney. And how did she look? Hale. Well, she looked queer. County Attorney. How do you mean, queer? Hale. Well, as if she didn't know what she was going to do next, and kind of done up. County Attorney. How did she seem to feel about your coming? Hale. Why, I don't think she minded, one way or other. She didn't pay much attention. I said, How do, Mrs. Wright? It's cold, ain't it? And she said, Is it? And went on kind of pleating at her apron. Well, I was surprised. She didn't ask me to come up to the stove or to sit down, but just sat there, not even looking at me. So I said, I want to see John. And then she laughed. I guess you would call it a laugh. I thought of Harry and the team outside, so I said a little sharp, Can't I see John? No, she says, kind of dull-like. Ain't he home? I said. Yes, says she, he's home. Then why can't I see him? I asked her, out of patience. 'Cause he's dead, says she. Dead, says I. She just nodded her head, not getting a bit excited, but rocking back and forth. Why, where is he? Says I, not knowing what to say. She just pointed upstairs, like that, himself pointing to the room above. I got up with the idea of going up there. I walked from there to here. Then I says, What did he die of? He died of a rope around his neck, says she, and just went on pleating at her apron. Well, I went out and called Harry. I thought I might need help. We went upstairs, and there he was, lying. County Attorney. I think I'd rather have you go into that upstairs where you can point it all out. Just go on now with the rest of the story. Hale. Well, my first thought was to get that rope off. It looked... Stops. His face twitches. But Harry, he went up to him and says, No, he's dead all right, and we'd better not touch anything. So we went back downstairs. She was still sitting that same way. Has anybody been notified? I asked. No, says she, unconcerned. Who did this, Mrs. Wright? Said Harry. He said it businesslike, and she stopped pleating of her apron. I don't know, she says. You don't know? Says Harry. No, says she. Weren't you sleeping in the bed with him? Says Harry. Yes, says she, but I was on the inside. Somebody slipped the rope around his neck and strangled him, and you didn't wake up, says Harry. I didn't wake up, she said after him. We must have looked as if we didn't see how that could be, for after a minute she said, I sleep sound. Harry was going to ask her more questions, but I said maybe we ought to let her tell her story first to the coroner or the sheriff, so Harry went fast as he could to River's place, where there's a telephone. County Attorney. And what did Mrs. Wright do when she knew that you had gone for the coroner? Hale. She moved from that chair to this one over here, pointing to a small chair in the corner, and just sat there with her hands held together and looking down. I got a feeling that I ought to make some conversation, so I said I had come in to see if John wanted to put in a telephone, and at that she started to laugh, and then she stopped and looked at me, scared. The county attorney, who has had his notebook out, makes a note. I don't know, maybe it wasn't scared. I wouldn't like to say it was. Soon Harry got back, and then Dr. Lloyd came, and you, Mr. Peters, and so I guess that's all I know that you don't. County Attorney, looking around. I guess we'll go upstairs first, and then out to the barn and around there, to the sheriff. You're convinced that there was nothing important here? Nothing that would point to any motive? Sheriff. Nothing here but kitchen things. The county attorney, after again looking around the kitchen, opens the door of a cupboard closet. He gets up on a chair and looks on a shelf, pulls his hand away, sticky. County attorney. Here's a nice mess. The women draw nearer. Mrs. Peters to the other woman. Oh, that's her fruit. It did freeze. To the lawyer. She worried about that when it turned so cold. She said the fire'd go out and her jars would break. Sheriff. Well, you can't beat the woman. Held for murder and worrying about her preserves. County attorney. I guess before we're through she may have something more serious than preserves to worry about. Hale. Well, women are used to worrying over trifles. The two women move a little closer together. County attorney, with the gallantry of a young politician. And yet, for all their worries, what would we do without the ladies? The women do not unbend. He goes to the sink, takes a dipperful of water from the pail, and pouring it into a basin, washes his hands, starts to wipe them on the roller towel, turns it for a cleaner place. Dirty towels! Kicks his foot against the pans under the sink. Not much of a housekeeper, would you say, ladies? Mrs. Hale, stiffly. There's a great deal of work to be done on a farm. County attorney. To be sure, and yet, with a little bow to her, I know there are some Dixon County farmhouses which do not have such roller towels. He gives it a pull to expose its length again. Mrs. Hale. Those towels get dirty awful quick. Men's hands aren't always as clean as they might be. County attorney. Ah, loyal to your sex, I see. But you and Mrs. Wright were neighbors. I suppose you were friends, too. Mrs. Hale, shaking her head. I've not seen much of her in late years. I've not been in this house. It's more than a year. County attorney. And why was that? You didn't like her? Mrs. Hale. I liked her all well enough. Farmers' wives have their hands full, Mr. Henderson. And then... County attorney. Yes? Mrs. Hale, looking about. It never seemed a very cheerful place. County attorney. No, it's not cheerful. I shouldn't say she had the homemaking instinct. Mrs. Hale. Well, I don't know as Wright had either. County attorney. You mean that they didn't get on very well? Mrs. Hale. No, I don't mean anything, but I don't think a place'd be any cheerfuller for John Wright's being in it. County attorney. I'd like to talk more of that a little later. I want to get the lay of things upstairs now. He goes to the left, where 3 steps lead to a stair door. Sheriff. I suppose anything Mrs. Peters does will be all right. She was to take in some clothes for her, you know, and a few little things. We left in such a hurry yesterday. County attorney. Yes, but I would like to see what you take, Mrs. Peters, and keep an eye out for anything that might be of use to us. Mrs. Peters. Yes, Mr. Henderson. The women listen to the men's steps on the stairs, then look about the kitchen. Mrs. Hale. I'd hate to have men coming into my kitchen, snooping around and criticizing. She arranges the pans under sink, which the lawyer had shoved out of place. Mrs. Peters. Of course it's no more than their duty. Mrs. Hale. Duty's all right, but I guess that deputy sheriff that came out to make the fire might have got a little of this on. Gives the roller towel a pull. Wish I'd thought of that sooner. Seems mean to talk about her for not having things slicked up when she had to come away in such a hurry. Mrs. Peters, who has gone to a small table in the left rear corner of the room and lifted one end of a towel that covers a pan. She had bread set. Stands still. Mrs. Hale, eyes fixed on a loaf of bread beside the bread box, which is on a low shelf at the other side of the room, moves slowly toward it. She was going to put this in there. Picks up loaf, then abruptly drops it, in a manner of returning to familiar things. It's a shame about her fruit. I wonder if it's all gone. Gets up on the chair and looks. I think there's some here that's all right, Mrs. Peters. Yes, here, holding it toward the window. This is cherries, too, looking again. I declare I believe that's the only one. Gets down, bottle in her hand. Goes to the sink and wipes it off on the outside. She'll feel awful bad after all her hard work in the hot weather. I remember the afternoon I put my cherries last summer. She puts the bottle on the big kitchen table, center of the room. With a sigh, is about to sit down in the rocking chair. Before she is seated, realizes what chair it is. With a slow look at it, steps back. The chair which she has touched rocks back and forth. Mrs. Peters. Well, I must get those things from the front closet. She goes to the door at the right, but after looking into the other room, steps back. You coming with me, Mrs. Hale? You could help me carry them. They go into the other room. Reappear, Mrs. Peters carrying a dress and skirt, Mrs. Hale following with a pair of shoes. Mrs. Peters. My, it's cold in there. She puts the clothes on the big table and hurries to the stove. Mrs. Hale, examining the skirt. Wright was close. I think maybe that's why she kept so much to herself. She didn't even belong to the Ladies' Aid. I suppose she felt she couldn't do her part, and then you don't enjoy things when you feel shabby. She used to wear pretty clothes and be lively when she was Minnie Foster, one of the town girls singing in the choir. But that was 30 years ago. This all you was to take in? Mrs. Peters. She said she wanted an apron. Funny thing to want, for there isn't much to get you dirty in jail, goodness knows. But I suppose just to make her feel more natural. She said they was in the top drawer in this cupboard. Yes, here. And then her little shawl that always hung behind the door. Opens stair door and looks. Yes, here it is. Quickly shuts door leading upstairs. Mrs. Hale, abruptly moving toward her. Mrs. Peters? Mrs. Peters. Yes, Mrs. Hale. Mrs. Hale. Do you think she did it? Mrs. Peters, in a frightened voice. Oh, I don't know. Mrs. Hale. Well, I don't think she did. Asking for an apron in her little shawl? Worrying about her fruit? Mrs. Peters starts to speak, glances up, where footsteps are heard in the room above, in a low voice. Mr. Peters says it looks bad for her. Mr. Henderson is awful sarcastic in a speech, and he'll make fun of her saying she didn't wake up. Mrs. Hale. Well, I guess John Wright didn't wake when they was slipping that rope under his neck. Mrs. Peters. No, it's strange. It must have been done awful crafty and still. They say it was such a funny way to kill a man, rigging it all up like that. Mrs. Hale. That's just what Mr. Hale said. There was a gun in the house. He says that's what he can't understand. Mrs. Peters. Mr. Henderson said coming out that what was needed for the case was a motive, something to show anger or sudden feeling. Mrs. Hale, who is standing by the table. Well, I don't see any signs of anger around here. She puts her hand on the dish towel which lies on the table, stands looking down at table, one half of which is clean, the other half messy. It's wiped up to here. Makes a move as if to finish work, then turns and looks at loaf of bread outside the bread box. Drops towel. In that voice of coming back to familiar things. Wonder how they are finding things upstairs. I hope she had it a little more read up there. You know, it seems kind of sneaking, locking her up in town and then coming out here and trying to get her own house to turn against her. Mrs. Peters. But Mrs. Hale, the law is the law. Mrs. Hale. I suppose 'tis. Unbuttoning her coat. Better loosen up your things, Mrs. Peters. You won't feel them when you go out. Mrs. Peters takes off her fur tippet, goes to hang it on hook at back of room, stands looking at the under part of the small corner table. Mrs. Peters. She was piecing a quilt. She brings the large sewing basket, and they look at the bright pieces. Mrs. Hale. It's a log cabin pattern. Pretty, isn't it? I wonder if she was going to quilt it or just knot it. Footsteps have been heard coming down the stairs. The sheriff enters, followed by Hale and the county attorney. Sheriff. They wonder if she was going to quilt it or just knot it. The men laugh. The women look abashed. County attorney, rubbing his hands over the stove. Frank's fire didn't do much up there, did it? Well, let's go out to the barn and get that cleared up. The men go outside. Mrs. Hale, resentfully. I don't know as there's anything so strange our taking up our time with little things while we're waiting for them to get the evidence. She sits down at the big table, smoothing out a block with decision. I don't see as it's anything to laugh about. Mrs. Peters, apologetically. Of course they've got awful important things on their minds. Pulls up a chair and joins Mrs. Hale at the table. Mrs. Hale, examining another block. Mrs. Peters, look at this one. Here, this is the one she was working on. And look at the sewing. All the rest of it has been so nice and even. And look at this. It's all over the place. Why, it looks as if she didn't know what she was about. After she has said this, they look at each other, then start to glance back at the door. After an instant, Mrs. Hale has pulled at a knot and ripped the sewing. Mrs. Peters. Oh, what are you doing, Mrs. Hale? Mrs. Hale, mildly. Just pulling out a stitch or two that's not sewed very good. Threading a needle. Bad sewing always makes me fidgety. Mrs. Peters, nervously. I don't think we ought to touch things. Mrs. Hale. I'll just finish up this end. Suddenly stopping and leaning forward. Mrs. Peters? Mrs. Peters. Yes, Mrs. Hale. Mrs. Hale. What do you suppose she was so nervous about? Mrs. Peters. Oh, I don't know. I don't know as she was nervous. I sometimes sew awful queer when I'm just tired. Mrs. Hale starts to say something, looks at Mrs. Peters, then goes on sewing. Well, I must get these things wrapped up. They may be through sooner than we think. Putting apron and other things together. I wonder where I can find a piece of paper and string. Mrs. Hale. In that cupboard, maybe. Mrs. Peters, looking in cupboard. Why, here's a bird cage. Holds it up. Did she have a bird, Mrs. Hale? Mrs. Hale. Why, I don't know whether she did or not. I've not been here for so long. There was a man around last year selling canaries cheap, but I don't know as she took one. Maybe she did. She used to sing real pretty herself. Mrs. Peters, glancing around. Seems funny to think of a bird here. But she must have had one, or why would she have a cage? I wonder what happened to it. Mrs. Hale. I suppose maybe the cat got it. Mrs. Peters. No, she didn't have a cat. She's got that feeling some people have about cats, being afraid of them. My cat got in her room, and she was real upset and asked me to take it out. Mrs. Hale. My sister Betsie was like that. Queer, ain't it? Mrs. Peters, examining the cage. Why, look at this door. It's broke. One hinge is pulled apart. Mrs. Hale, looking too. Looks as if someone must have been rough with it. Mrs. Peters. Why, yes. She brings the cage forward and puts it on the table. Mrs. Hale. I wish if they're going to find any evidence they'd be about it. I don't like this place. Mrs. Peters. But I'm awfully glad you came with me, Mrs. Hale. It would be lonesome for me sitting here alone. Mrs. Hale. It would, wouldn't it? Dropping her sewing. But I tell you what I do wish, Mrs. Peters. I wish I had come over sometimes when she was here. Looking around the room. Wish I had. Mrs. Peters. But of course you were awful busy, Mrs. Hale. Your house and your children. Mrs. Hale. I could have come. I stayed away because it weren't cheerful. And that's why I ought to have come. I've never liked this place. Maybe because it's down in a hollow and you don't see the road. I don't know what it is, but it's a lonesome place and always was. I wish I had come over to see Minnie Foster sometimes. I can see now. Shakes her head. Mrs. Peters. Well, you mustn't reproach yourself, Mrs. Hale. Somehow we just don't see how it is with other folks until something comes up. Mrs. Hale. Not having children makes less work, but it makes a quiet house, and ride out to work all day, and no company when he did come in. Did you know John Wright, Mrs. Peters? Mrs. Peters. Not to know him. I've seen him in town. They say he was a good man. Mrs. Hale. Yes, good. He didn't drink, and kept his word as well as most, I guess, and paid his debts. But he was a hard man, Mrs. Peters, just to pass the time of day with him. Shivers. Like a raw wind that gets to the bone. Pauses, her eyes falling on the cage. I should think she would have wanted a bird. But what do you suppose went with it? Mrs. Peters. I don't know, unless it got sick and died. She reaches over and swings the broken door. Swings it again. Both women watch it. Mrs. Hale. You weren't raised round here, were you? Mrs. Peters shakes her head. You didn't know her. Mrs. Peters. Not till they brought her in yesterday. Mrs. Hale. Come to think of it, she was kind of like a bird herself, real sweet and pretty, but kind of timid and fluttery. How she did change. Silence. Then, as if struck by a happy thought and relieved to get back to everyday things. Tell you what, Mrs. Peters, why don't you take the quilt in with you? It might take up her mind. Mrs. Peters. Why, I think that's a real nice idea, Mrs. Hale. There couldn't possibly be any objection to it, could there? Now, just what would I take? I wonder if her patches are in here, and her things. They look in the sewing basket. Mrs. Hale. Here's some red. I expect this has got sewing things in it. Brings out a fancy box. What a pretty box. Looks like something somebody would give you. Maybe her scissors are in here. Opens box. Suddenly puts her hand to her nose. Why, Mrs. Peters bends nearer, then turns her face away. There's something wrapped up in this piece of silk. Mrs. Peters. Why, this isn't her scissors. Mrs. Hale, lifting the silk. Oh, Mrs. Peters, it's... Mrs. Peters bends closer. Mrs. Peters. It's the bird. Mrs. Hale, jumping up. But, Mrs. Peters, look at it. Its neck. Look at its neck. It's all other side, too. Mrs. Peters. Somebody wrung its neck. Their eyes meet. A look of growing comprehension. Of horror. Steps are heard outside. Mrs. Hale slips box under quilt pieces and sinks into her chair. Enter sheriff and county attorney. Mrs. Peters rises. County attorney, as one turning from serious things to little pleasantries. Well, ladies, have you decided whether she was going to quilt it or not it? Mrs. Peters. We think she was going to not it. County attorney. Well, that's interesting, I'm sure. Seeing the bird cage. Has the bird flown? Mrs. Hale, putting more quilt pieces over the box. We think the cat got it. County attorney, preoccupied. Is there a cat? Mrs. Hale glances in a quick, covert way at Mrs. Peters. Mrs. Peters. Well, not now. They're superstitious, you know. They leave. County attorney, to Sheriff Peters, continuing an interrupted conversation. No sign at all of anyone having come in from the outside. Their own rope. Now let's go up again and go over it piece by piece. They start upstairs. It would have to have been someone who knew just the... Mrs. Peters sits down. The two women sit there not looking at one another, but as if peering into something and at the same time holding back. When they talk now, it is in the manner of feeling their way over strange ground, as if afraid of what they are saying, but as if they cannot help saying it. Mrs. Hale. She liked the bird. She was going to bury it in that pretty box. Mrs. Peters in a whisper. When I was a girl, my kitten, there was a boy took a hatchet, and before my eyes, and before I could get there. Covers her face an instant. If they hadn't held me back, I would have... Catches herself, looks upstairs where steps are heard, falters weakly. Hurt him. Mrs. Hale, with a slow look around her. I wonder how it would seem never to have any children around. Pause. No, Wright wouldn't like the bird, a thing that sang. She used to sing. He killed that, too. Mrs. Peters, moving uneasily. We don't know who killed the bird. Mrs. Hale. I knew John Wright. Mrs. Peters. It was an awful thing that was done in this house that night, Mrs. Hale. Killing a man while he slept, slipping a rope around his neck that choked the life out of him. Mrs. Hale. His neck choked the life out of him. Her hand goes out and rests on the bird cage. Mrs. Peters, with rising voice. We don't know who killed him. We don't know. Mrs. Hale, her own feeling not interrupted. If there'd been years and years of nothing, then a bird to sing to you, it would be awful, still, after the bird was still. Mrs. Peters, something within her speaking. I know what stillness is. When we homesteaded in Dakota, and my first baby died, after he was 2 years old, and me with no other then. Mrs. Hale, moving. How soon do you suppose they'll be through, looking for the evidence? Mrs. Peters. I know what stillness is. Pulling herself back. The law has got to punish crime, Mrs. Hale. Mrs. Hale, not as if answering that. I wish you'd seen Minnie Foster when she wore a white dress with blue ribbons and stood up there in the choir and sang. A look around the room. Oh, I wish I'd come over here once in a while. That was a crime. That was a crime. Who's going to punish that? Mrs. Peters, looking upstairs. We mustn't take on. Mrs. Hale. I might have known she needed help. I know how things can be for women. I tell you, it's queer, Mrs. Peters. We live close together and we live far apart. We all go through the same things. It's all just a different kind of the same thing. Brushes her eyes, noticing the bottle of fruit, reaches out for it. If I was you, I wouldn't tell her fruit was gone. Tell her it ain't. Tell her it's all right. Take this in to prove it to her. She may never know whether it was broke or not. Mrs. Peters takes the bottle, looks about for something to wrap it in. Takes petticoat from the clothes brought from the other room. Very nervously begins winding this around the bottle. In a false voice. My, it's a good thing the men couldn't hear us. Wouldn't they just laugh, getting all stirred up over a little thing like a dead canary, as if that could have anything to do with, wouldn't they laugh? The men are heard coming downstairs. Mrs. Hale, under her breath. Maybe they would. Maybe they wouldn't. County Attorney. No, Peters, it's all perfectly clear except a reason for doing it. But you know juries when it comes to women. If there was some definite thing, something to show, something to make a story about, a thing that would connect up with a strange way of doing it. The women's eyes meet for an instant. Enter Hale from outer door. Hale. Well, I've got the team around. Pretty cold out there. County Attorney. I'm going to stay here a while by myself. To the Sheriff. You can send Frank out for me, can't you? I want to go over everything. I'm not satisfied that we can't do better. Sheriff. Do you want to see what Mrs. Peters is going to take in? The lawyer goes to the table, picks up the apron, laughs. County Attorney. Oh, I guess they're not very dangerous things the ladies have picked out. Moves a few things about, disturbing the quilt pieces which cover the box. Steps back. No, Mrs. Peters doesn't need supervising. For that matter, a sheriff's wife is married to the law. Ever think of it that way, Mrs. Peters? Mrs. Peters. Not just that way. Sheriff, chuckling. Married to the law. Moves toward the other room. I just want you to come in here a minute, George. We ought to take a look at these windows. County Attorney, scoffingly. Oh, windows. Sheriff. We'll be right out, Mr. Hale. Hale goes outside. The sheriff follows the county attorney into the other room. Then Mrs. Hale rises, hands tight together, looking intensely at Mrs. Peters, whose eyes make a slow turn, finally meeting Mrs. Hale's. A moment Mrs. Hale's holds her, then her own eyes point the way to where the box is concealed. Suddenly Mrs. Peters throws back quilt pieces and tries to put the box in the bag she is wearing. It is too big. She opens box, starts to take bird out, cannot touch it, goes to pieces, stands there helpless. Sound of a knob turning in the other room. Mrs. Hale snatches the box and puts it in the pocket of her big coat. Enter County Attorney and Sheriff. County Attorney, facetiously. Well, Henry, at least we found out that she was not going to quilt it. She was going to... What is it you call it, ladies? Mrs. Hale, her hand against her pocket. We call it not it, Mr. Henderson. Curtain. End of Trifles by Susan Glaspell.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read and recorded by Betsie Bush. Marquette, Michigan, December 2006. War Brides, a play in one act, by Marion Craig Wentworth. Cast: Hedwig, Amelia, Mother, Hoffman, Mina, Arno, Hertz. Time: present. Place: a war-ridden country. The war brides were cheered with enthusiasm, and the churches were crowded when the wedding parties spoke the ceremony in concert. Press clipping. Scene: a room in a peasant's cottage in a war-ridden country. A large fireplace at the right. Near it a high-backed settle. On the left a heavy oak table and benches. Woven mats on the floor. A door at left leads into a bedroom. In the corner a cupboard. At the back a wide window with scarlet geraniums and an open door. A few firearms are stacked near the fireplace. There is an air of homely color and neatness about the room. Through the open door may be seen women stacking grain. Others go by carrying huge baskets of grapes or loads of wood, and gradually it penetrates the mind that all these workers are women, aristocrats and peasants side by side. Now and then a bugle blows or a drum beats in the distance. A squad of soldiers marches quickly by. There is everywhere the tense atmosphere of unusual circumstance, the anxiety and excitement of war. Amelia, a slight flaxen-haired girl of 19, comes in. She brushes off the hay with which she is covered, and goes to packing a bag with a secret but determined air. The mother passes the window and appears in the doorway. She is old and work-worn, but sturdy and stoical. Now she carries a heavy load of wood and is weary. She casts a sharp eye at Amelia. Mother: What are you doing, girl? Amelia starts and puts the bag in the cupboard. Who's going away? They haven't sent for Arno. Amelia: No. Mother sighs and drops her load on the hearth. Is the hay all in? Amelia: Yes, I put in the last load. All the big work on our place is done, and so... Looks at her mother and hesitates. Her mother begins to chop the wood into kindling. I'll do that, Mother. Mother: Let be, girl. It keeps me from worrying. Get a bite to eat. What were you doing with that bag? Who were you packing it for? Amelia, with downcast eyes: Myself. Mother, anxious: What for? Amelia: Sit down, Mother, and be still while I tell you. Pushes her mother into a chair. Mother starts. Is there any news? Quick, tell me. Amelia: Not since yesterday, only they say Franz is at the front. We don't know where Emil and Otto are, and there's been a battle, but... Mother murmurs with eyes closed: My boys, my boys. Amelia: Don't, Mother, they may come back. A cheer is heard. Mother, starting: What's that? Amelia, running to the door and looking out: They are cheering the war brides, that's all. Mother: Aye, there's been another wedding ceremony. Amelia: Yes. Mother: How many war brides today? Amelia: 10, they said. Mother, nodding: Aye, that is good. Has anyone asked you, Amelia? Amelia looks embarrassed. Someone should ask you. You are a good-looking girl. Amelia, in a low voice: Hans Hoffman asked me last night. Mother: The young and handsome lieutenant? You are lucky. You said yes? Amelia shakes her head. No. Mother. Ah, well. Amelia. I hardly know him. I've only spoken to him once before. Oh, Mother, that isn't what I want to do. Mother. What did you tell him? Amelia, timidly. That I was going away to join the Red Cross. Mother. Amelia! Amelia. He didn't believe me. He kissed me and I ran away. Mother. The Red Cross? Amelia, eagerly. Yes, that is what I was going to tell you just now. That is why I was packing the bag. Gets it. I want to go. I want to go tonight. I can't stand this waiting. Mother. You leave me too? Amelia. I want to go to the front with Franz and Otto and Emil, to nurse them, to take care of them if they are wounded, and all the others. Let me, Mother. I too must do something for my country. The grapes are plucked and the hay is stacked. Hedwig is gathering the wheat. You can spare me. I have been dreaming of it day and night. Mother, setting her lips decisively. No, Amelia. Amelia. Oh, Mother, why? Mother. You must help me with Hedwig. I can't manage her alone. Amelia. Hedwig. Mother. She is strange. She broods. Hadn't you noticed? Amelia. Why, yes, but I thought she was worrying about Franz. She adores him, and any day she may hear that he is killed. It's the waiting that's so awful. Mother. But it's more than the waiting with Hedwig. You will help Franz more by staying home to take care of his wife, Amelia, especially now. Amelia, puzzled. Now? Mother goes to her work-basket. Hedwig has told you nothing? Amelia. No. Mother. She is a strange girl. She asked me to keep it a secret. I don't know why, but now I think you should know. See? Very proudly, she holds up the tiny baby garments she is knitting. Amelia, pleased and astonished. So Franz and Hedwig. Mother nods. For their child, in 6 months now. My first grandchild, Amelia. Franz's boy, perhaps. I shall hear a little one's voice in this house again. Amelia, uncertainly, as she looks at the little things. Still, I want to go. Mother, firmly. We must take care of Hedwig, Amelia. She is to be a mother. That is our first duty. It is our only hope of an heir if you won't marry soon. And if the boys don't come back. Amelia. Arno is left. Mother. But they'll be calling him next. It is his birthday today, too, poor lad. He's on the jump to be off. I see him gone, too. God knows I may never see one of them again. I sit here in the long evenings and think how death may take my boys. Even this minute they may be breathing their last. And then I knit this baby sock and think of the precious little life that's coming. It's my only comfort, Amelia. Nothing must happen now. Amelia, with a touch of impatience. What's the matter with Hedwig? Mother. I don't know what it is. She acts as if she didn't want to bring her child into the world. She talks wild. I tell you, I must have that child, Amelia. I cannot live else. Hedwig frightens me. The other night I found her sitting on the edge of her bed, staring, when she should have been asleep, as if she saw visions, and whispering, I will send a message to the Emperor. What message? I had to shake her out of it. She refuses to make a thing for her baby. Says, wait till I see what they do to Franz. It's unnatural. Amelia. I can't understand her. I never could. I always thought it was because she was a factory town girl. Mother. If anything should happen to Franz in the state she's in now, Hedwig might go out of her mind entirely. So you had best stay by, Amelia. We must keep a close eye on her. There is a knock at the door. Who's that? Amelia looks out of the windows and then whispers, It's Hans Hoffman. The knock is repeated. Mother. Open, girl. Don't stand there. Enter Hoffman, gay, familiar, inclined to stoutness, but good-looking, accustomed to having the women bow down to him. Hoffman to Amelia. Aha! You gave me the slip yesterday. Amelia. My mother. Hoffman, nodding. Good day, mother. She curtsies. Coming closer to Amelia. Where did you run to? Here, she as good as promised me she would wed me today, mother, and then... Amelia. Oh, no. Hoffman. Yes, you did. You let me kiss you. Amelia, taken aback. Oh, sir. Hoffman. And when I got to the church square today, no bride for Hans Hoffman. Well, I must say, they had the laugh on me, for I had told them I had found the girl for me, the prettiest bride of the lot. But tomorrow... Amelia. I can't. Hoffman, taking hold of her. Oh, yes, you can. I won't bother you long. I'm off to the front any day now. Come, promise me. What do you say, Mother? Mother, slowly. I should like to see her wed. Hoffman. There! Amelia, shrinking from both him and the idea. But I don't know you well enough yet. Hoffman. Well, look me over. Don't you think I am good enough for her, Mother? Besides, we can't stop to think on such things now, Amelia. It is war time. This is an emergency measure. And then I'm a soldier, like to die for my country. That ought to count for something, a good deal, I should say, if you love your country, and you do, don't you, Amelia? Amelia. Oh, yes. Hoffman. Well, then, we can get married and get acquainted afterward. Amelia, faintly. I wanted to be a nurse. Hoffman. Nonsense. Pretty girls like you should marry. The priests and the generals have commanded it. It's for the fatherland. Ought she not to wed me, Mother? Mother, nodding impersonally. Aye, it is for the fatherland they ask it. Hoffman. Of course, it is your patriotic duty, Amelia. You're funny. All the young women are tickled at the chance. But you are the one I have picked out, and I am going to have you. Now there's a good girl, promise. A hubbub of voices and a cheer are heard outside. Enter Mina, flushed, pretty, light-headed. Amelia. Mina! Mina, holding out her hand. Amelia, see, my wedding ring! Amelia. Iron! Mina, triumphantly. Yes, a war bride! Amelia. You? Mina. That's what I am, whirling gaily about. Hoffman, shaking her hand. Good for you. Congratulations. Mina. Didn't you hear them cheer? That was for me. Hoffman. There's patriotism for you, Amelia. Amelia. When were you married, Mina? Mina. Just now. There were 10 of us. We all answered in chorus. It was fun, just like a theater. Then the priest made a speech, and the burgomaster and the captain. The people cheered, and then our husbands had to go to drill for an hour. Oh, I never was so thrilled. It was grand. They told us all we were the true patriots. Hoffman. Hurrah! And so you are. Mina. Our names will go down in history, honored by a whole people, they said. They are all carried away by Mina's enthusiasm. Even Amelia warms up. Amelia. But whom did you marry, Mina? Mina. Heinrich Berg. Amelia, dubious. That loafer? Mina. He's all right. He's a soldier now. Why, he may be a hero fighting for the fatherland, and that makes a lot of difference, Amelia. Hoffman: What did I tell you? Mina: I probably wouldn't have picked him out in peace times, but it is different now. He only asked me last night. Of course, he may get killed. They said we'd have a widow's pension fund, us and our children, forever and ever if the boys didn't come back. So you see, I won't be out anything. Anyway, it's for the country. We'll be famous as war brides. Even the name sounds glorious, doesn't it? War bride. Isn't that fine? Hoffman: Here's a little lady who will hear herself called that tomorrow. Takes Amelia's hand. Mina, clapping her hands: Amelia, a war bride too! Good! Hoffman: You'll be proud to hear her called that, won't you, Mother? Give us your blessing. Mina: I'd rather be a wife or a widow any day than be an old maid. And to be a war bride, oh! Amelia is blushing and tremulous. Mother, with a faraway look: It is for the fatherland, Amelia. Aye, aye, the masters have said so. It is the will and judgment of those higher than us. They are wise. Our country will need children. Aye. Say yes, my daughter. You will not say no when your country bids you. It is your emperor, your country, who asks more than Hans Hoffman. Amelia, impressed, and questions herself to see if her patriotism is strong enough to stand the test, while Hoffman, charmed by Amelia's gentleness, is moved by more personal feeling. Hoffman, kissing Amelia on both cheeks: There, it's all settled. A faint cheer is heard without. Tomorrow they will cheer you like that. And when I go, I shall have a bride to wave me goodbye instead of... Enter Hedwig. She stands in the doorway looking out on the distant crowds. She is tall, well-built, and carries herself proudly. Strong, intelligent features, but pale. Her eyes are large with anxiety. She has soft, wavy black hair. An inward flame seems to be consuming her. The sounds continue in the distance. Cheering, disputing, mingled with far bugle calls and marching feet. Hedwig, contemptuously: Ha! The sound startles the others. They turn. All: Hedwig! Hedwig, still in the doorway, looking out: War brides! Mina, pertly: You're a war bride yourself, Hedwig. Hedwig turns quickly, locates Mina, almost springs at her. Don't you dare call me a war bride. My ring is gold. See? Seizes Mina's hand and then throws it from her. Not iron like yours. Mina, boldly taunting: They even call you the first war bride. Hedwig, furious, towering over her, her hand on her shoulder: Say why? Why? Mina, weakening: Because you were the first one to be married when the war broke out. Hedwig, both hands on her shoulders: Because the government commanded? Because they bribed me with the promise of a widow's pension? Tell the truth. Mina, faintly: No, let me go. Hedwig: So, and how long had Franz and I been engaged? Now say. Mina, beginning to be frightened: 2 years. Hedwig, flinging her off: Of course. Everybody knows it. Every village this side the river knew we were to be married this summer. We've dreamed and worked for nothing else all these months. It had nothing to do with the war, our love, our marriage. So you see, I am no war bride. Walks scornfully away. Not like you, anyway. They all stare at her. Hoffman, stepping forward indignantly: I don't know why you should have this contempt for our war brides and speak like that. Hedwig sits down, half turned away. She shrugs her shoulders, and her lips curl in a little smile. Hoffman: They are coming to the rescue of their country, saving it, else it will perish. Hedwig, bitterly: Ha! Hoffman, waxing warmer. They are the saviors of the future. Hedwig, sadly. The future. Mother, softly laying her hand on Hedwig's shoulder. Hedwig, be more respectful. Herr Hoffman is a lieutenant. Hoffman. When we are gone, the best of us, what will the country do if it has no children? Hedwig. Why didn't you think of that before you started this wicked war? Hoffman. I tell you it is a glory to be a war bride. There. Hedwig, with a shrug. A breeding machine. They all draw back. Why not call it what it is? Speak the naked truth for once. Hoffman. You'll take that back tomorrow when your sister stands up in the church with me. Hedwig, starting up. Amelia? Marry you? No! Amelia, is this true? Amelia, hesitating, troubled and uncertain. They tell me I must, for the fatherland. Hedwig. Marry this man whom you scarcely know, whom surely you cannot love. Why, you make a mock of marriage. It isn't that they have tempted you with a widow's pension. It is so tiny it's next to nothing. Surely you wouldn't yield to that. Amelia, frightened. I did want to go as a nurse, but the priests and the generals, they say we must marry for the fatherland, Hedwig. Hoffman, to Hedwig. I command you to be silent. Hedwig. Not when my sister's happiness is at stake. If you come back, she will have to live with you for the rest of her life. Hoffman. That isn't the question now. We are going away, the best of us, to be shot most likely. Don't you suppose we want to send some part of ourselves into the future, since we cannot live ourselves? There, that's straight, and right, too. Hedwig, nodding slowly. What I said. To breed a soldier for the Empire, to restock the land. Fiercely. And for what? For food for the next generation's cannon? Oh, it is an insult to our womanhood. You violate all that makes marriage sacred. Agitated, she walks about the room. Are we women never to get up out of the dust? You never asked us if we wanted this war. Yet you ask us to gather in the crops, cut the wood, keep the world going, drudge and slave and wait and agonize, lose our all, and go on bearing more men and more to be shot down? If we breed the men for you, why don't you let us say what is to become of them? Do we want them shot the very breath of our life? Hoffman. It is for the fatherland. Hedwig. You use us and use us. Dolls, beasts of burden, and you expect us to bear it forever dumbly. But I won't. I shall cry out till I die. And now you say it almost out loud. Go and breed for the Empire. War brides, pah! Mina gasps, beginning to be terrified. Hoffman rages. Mother gazes with anxious concern. Amelia turns pale. Hoffman. I never would dream of speaking of Amelia like that. She is the sweetest girl I have seen for many a day. Hedwig. What will happen to Amelia? Have you thought of that? No, I warrant you haven't. Well, look, a few kisses and sweet words, the excitement of the ceremony, the cheers of the crowds, some days of living together. I won't call it marriage, for Franz and I are the ones who know what real marriage is and how sacred it is. Then what? Before you know it, in order to march. Amelia left to wait for her child. No husband to wait with her, to watch over her. Think of her anxiety if she learns to love you. What kind of child will it be? Look at me. What kind of child would I have, do you think? I can hardly breathe for thinking of my Franz, waiting, never knowing from minute to minute. From the way I feel, I should think my child would be born mad. I'm that wild with worrying. And then for Amelia to go through the agony alone? No husband to help her through the terrible hour? What solace can the state give then? And after that, if you don't come back? Who is going to earn the bread for her child? Struggle and struggle to feed herself and her child? and the fine sounding name you trick us with, war bride, humph! That will all be forgotten then. Only one thing can make it worth while, and do you know what that is? Love. We'll struggle through fire and water for that, but without it... Gesture. Hoffman, drawing Amelia to him. Don't listen to her, Amelia. Amelia, pushing Hoffman violently from her, runs from the room. No, no, I can't marry you. I won't. She shuts the door in his face. Hedwig, triumphantly. She will never be your war bride, Hans Hoffman. Hoffman, suddenly angry. By thunder, I've made a discovery. You're the woman. Hedwig. What woman? Hoffman. Yesterday there were 20 war brides. The day before there were nearly 30. Today there were only 10. There are rumors. Excitedly. I'll report you. They'll find you guilty. I myself can prove it. Hedwig. Well? Hoffman. I heard them say at the barracks that someone was talking the women out of marrying. They didn't know who, but they said if they caught anyone talking as you have just now, daring to question the wisdom of the Emperor and his generals, the Church too, she'd be guilty of treason. You are working against the Emperor, against the fatherland. Here you have done it right before my very eyes. You have taken Amelia right out of my arms. You're the woman who's been upsetting the others, and don't you deny it. Hedwig. Deny it? I am proud of it. Hoffman. Then the place for you is in jail. Do you know what will be the end of you? Hedwig, suddenly far away. Yes, I know. If Franz does not come back. I know. But first, clenching her hands, I must get my message to the Emperor. Hoffman, very angry. You will be shot for treason. Hedwig, coming back, laughing slightly. Shot? Oh, no, Herr Hans, you'd never shoot me. Hoffman. Why not? Hedwig. Do I have to tell you, stupid? I am a woman. I can get in the crops. I can keep the country going while you are away fighting. And most important, I might give you a soldier for your next army, for the kingdom. Don't you see my value? Laughs strangely. Oh, no, you'd never shoot me. Mother. There, don't excite her, sir. Hedwig, her head in her hands on the table. God, I wish you would shoot me. If you don't give me back my Franz, I've no mind to bring a son into the world for this bloody thing you call war. Hoffman. I am going straight to headquarters to report you. Starts to go. Enter Arno excitedly. He is boyish and fair, in his early 20s, and looks even younger than he really is. Arno to Hoffman. There's an order to march at once. Your regiment. Hoffman. Now? Arno. At once. You are wanted. They told me to tell you. Hoffman moves with military precision to the door, then turns to Hedwig. Hoffman. I shall take the time to report you. Goes. Mina to Arno. Does Heinrich's regiment go too? Arno. Heinrich who? Mina. Heinrich Berg. Arno. No, tomorrow. Mina, now thoroughly scared, is slinking to the door when Hedwig stops her. Hedwig. Ha! Little Mina, why do you run so fast? Heinrich does not go until tomorrow. Looks at her thoughtfully. Are you going to be able to fight it through, little Mina, when the hard days come? If you do give the Empire a soldier, will it be any comfort to know you are helping the falling birth rate? Mina, shivering. Oh, I'm afraid of you. Hedwig. Afraid of the truth, you mean. You see it at last in all its brutal bareness. Poor little Mina. She puts her arm around Mina with sudden tenderness. But you need not be afraid of me, little Mina. Oh, no. The trouble with me is I want no more war. Franz is at the war. I'm half mad with dreaming they have killed him. Any moment I may hear. If you loved your man as I do mine, little Mina, you'd understand. Well, go now, and tomorrow say goodbye to your husband of a day. Mina, with a frightened backward glance, runs out the door. Arno, who has been talking in low tones to his mother, now rises. Arno. Well, Mother, I haven't much time. She clings to his hand. Hedwig, starting. Arno! Arno. I am going too. Get those little things for me, Mother, will you? Mother goes to door and calls. Amelia, come! Arno has been called. Amelia comes in. Each in turn embraces him, sadly but bravely. Then the mother and sister gather together handkerchiefs, linen, writing pad and pencil, and small necessaries. Arno. I have only a few minutes. Hedwig, tenderly. Arno, my little brother. Oh, why must you go? You seem so young. Arno. I'm a man like the others. Don't forget that, Hedwig. Be brave, to help me to be brave. They sit on the settle. Hedwig, sighing. Yes, it cannot be helped. Will you see my Franz, Arno? You look so like him today. The day I first saw him in the fields, the day of the factory picnic. It seems long ago. Tell him how happy he made me, and how I loved him. He didn't believe in this war no more than I, yet he had to go. He dreaded lest he meet his friends on the other side. You remember those 2 young men from across the border? They worked all one winter side by side in the factory with Franz. They went home to join their regiments when the war was let loose on us. He never could stand it. Franz couldn't, if he were ordered to drive his bayonet into them. Gets up, full of emotion that is past expression. Oh, it is too monstrous. And for what? Arno. It is our duty. We belong to the fatherland. I would willingly give my life for my country. Hedwig. I would willingly give mine for peace. Arno. I must go. Goodbye, Hedwig. Hedwig, controlling her emotion as she kisses him. Goodbye, my brave, splendid little brother. Amelia. I may come to the front, too. They embrace tenderly. Mother, strong and quiet, unable to speak, holds his head against her breast for a moment. Fight well, my son. Arno. Yes, Mother. He tears himself away. The silent suffering of the mother is pitiful. Her hands are crossed on her breast. Her lips are seen to move in prayer. It is Hedwig who takes her in her arms and comforts her. Hedwig. And this is war, to tear our hearts out like this. Make Mother some tea, Amelia, can't you? Amelia prepares the cup of tea for her mother. Mother, after a few moments, composes herself. There, I am right now. I must remember, and you must help me, my daughters. It is for the fatherland. Hedwig, on her knees by the fire, shakes her head slowly. I wonder. Oh, Mother, I'm not patient like you. I couldn't stand it, to have a darling little baby and see him grow into a man, and then lose him like this. I'd rather never see the face of my child. Mother. We have them for a little while. I am thankful to God for what I have had. Hedwig. Then I must be very wicked. Mother. Are you sleeping better now, child? Hedwig. No, I am thinking of Franz. He may be lying there alone on the battlefield with none to help, and I here longing to put my arms around him. Buries her face on the mother's knees and sobs. Mother. Hush, Hedwig, be brave. Take care of yourself. We must see that Franz's child is well born. Hedwig. If Franz returns, yes. If not, I... Gets up impulsively as if to run out of the house. Amelia. Don't you want your tea, Hedwig? Hedwig throws open the door and suddenly confronts a man who apparently was about to enter the house. He is an official, the military head of the town, known as Captain Hertz. He is well along in years, rheumatic, but tremendously self-important. Hertz, stopping Hedwig. Wait one moment. You are the young woman I wish to see. You don't get away from me like that. Hedwig, drawing herself up, moves back a step or two. What is it? Hertz, turning to the old mother. Well, Maria, another son must go. Arno, you are an honored woman, a noble example to the state. Turns to Amelia. You have lost a very good husband, I understand. Well, you are a foolish girl. As for you, turning to Hedwig and eyeing her critically and severely, I hear pretty bad things. Yes, you have been talking to the women, telling them not to marry, not to multiply. In so doing, you are working directly against the government. It is the express request and command that our soldiers about to be called to the front and our young women should marry. You deliberately set yourself in opposition to that command. Are you aware that this is treason? Hedwig. Why are they asking this, Herr Captain? Hertz. Our statesmen are wise. They are thinking of the future state. The nation is fast being depopulated. We must take precautionary measures. We must have men for the future. I warn you that to do or say anything which subverts the plan of the empire for its own welfare, especially at a time when our national existence is in peril, well, it is treason. Were it not that you are the daughter-in-law of my friend, indicating the mother, I should not take the trouble to warn you, but pack you off to jail at once. Not another word from you, you understand? Hedwig, calmly, even sweetly, but with fire in her eyes. If I say I will keep quiet, will you promise me something in return? Hertz. What do you mean, quiet? Of course you'll keep quiet. Quiet as a tombstone if I have anything to say about it. Hedwig, calm and tense. I mean what I say. Promise to see to it that if we bear you the men for your nation, there shall be no more war. See to it that they shall not go forth to murder and be murdered. That is fair. We will do our part. We always have. Will you do yours? Promise. Hertz. Ridiculous. There will always be war. Hedwig. Then one day we will stop giving you men. Look at Mother. 4 sons torn from her in 1 month, and none of you ever asked her if she wanted war. You keep us here helpless. We don't want dreadnoughts and armies and fighting, we women. You tear our husbands, our sons from us. You never ask us to help you find a better way. And haven't we anything to say? Hertz. No, war is man's business. Hedwig. Who gives you the men? We women. We bear and rear and agonize. Well, if we are fit for that, we are fit to have a voice in the fate of the men we bear. If we can bring forth the men for the nation, we can sit with you in your councils and shape the destiny of the nation, and say whether it is to war or peace we give the sons we bear. Hertz, chuckling. Sit in the councils? That would be a joke, I see. Mother, she's a little... touches his forehead suggestively. Sit in the councils with the men and shape the destiny of the nation. Ha ha ha. Hedwig. Laugh, Herr Captain, but the day will come, and then there will be no more war. No, you will not always keep us here dumb, silent drudges. We will find a way. Hertz, turning to the mother. That is what comes of letting Franz go to the factory town, Maria. That is where he met this girl. Factory towns breed these ideas. To Hedwig. Well, we'll have none of that here. Authoritatively. Another word of this kind of insurrection, another word to the women of your treason, and you will be locked up and take your just punishment. You remember I had to look out for you in the beginning when you talked against this war. You're a firebrand, and you know how we handled the like of you. Goes to door, turns to the mother. I am sorry you have to have this trouble, Maria, on top of everything else. You don't deserve it. To Hedwig. You have been warned. Look out for yourself. Hedwig is standing rigid, with difficulty repressing the torrent of her feelings. Drums are heard coming nearer, and singing voices of men. Amelia at door. They are passing this way. Hedwig. Wave to Arno. Come, Mother. Ah, how quickly they go. The official steps out of the door. There is quick rhythm of marching feet as the departing regiment passes not very far from the house. There he is. Wave, Mother. Goodbye, goodbye. The women stand in the doorway waving their sad farewells, smiling bravely. The sounds grow less and less until there is the usual silence. In another month, in another week perhaps, all the men will be gone. We will be a village of women, not a man left. She leads the old mother into the house once more. Hertz in the door. What did you say? Hedwig. Not a man left, I said. Hertz. You forget. I shall be here. Hedwig. You are old. You don't count. They think you are only a woman, Herr Captain. Hertz, insulted. You. Hedwig. Oh, don't take it badly, sir. You are honored. Is the name of woman always to be despised? Look out in those fields. Who cleared them and plucked the vineyards clean? You think we are left at home because we are weak? Ah, no, we are strong. That is why. Strong to keep the world going, to keep sacred the greatest things in life, love and home and work, to remind men of peace. With a quick change. If only you really were a woman, Herr Captain, that you might breed soldiers for the Empire, your glory would be complete. The old captain is about to make an angry reply when there is a commotion outside. The words, "News from the front," are distinguished, growing more distinct. The captain rushes out. The women are paralyzed with apprehension for a moment. Mother. Amelia, go and see. Hedwig, come here. Hedwig crouches on the floor close to the mother, her eyes wide with dread. In a few moments Amelia returns, dragging her feet, woe in her face, and unable to deal the blow which must fall on the two women, who stare at her with blanched faces. Amelia, falling at her mother's knee. Mother. Mother, scarcely breathing. Which one? Amelia. All of them. Mother, dazed. All my boys? Amelia. Emil, Otto, be thankful Arno is left. The mother drops her head against the chair and silently prays. Hedwig creeps nearer Amelia and holds her face between her hands, looking into her eyes. Hedwig, whispering. Franz? Amelia. Franz, too. Hedwig lies prostrate on the floor. Their grief is very silent. Terrible because it is so dumb and stoical. The mother is the first to rouse herself. She bends over Hedwig. Mother. Hedwig. Hedwig sobs convulsively. Don't, child. Be careful for the little one's sake. Hedwig sits up. For your child, be quiet, be brave. Hedwig. I loved him so, Mother. Mother. Yes, he was my boy, my firstborn. Hedwig. Your firstborn, and this is the end. She rises up in unutterable wrath and despair. Oh, God! Mother, anxious for her. Promise me you will be careful, Hedwig, for the sake of your child, your firstborn. That is to be... Hedwig. My child? For this end? For the Empire? The war that is to be? No! Mother, half to herself. He may look like Franz. Hedwig quickly seizes the pistol from the mantel shelf and moves to the bedroom door. Amelia, watching her, sees her do it, and cries out in alarm and rushes to take it from her. Amelia, in horror. Hedwig, what are you doing? Give it to me. No, you must not. You have too much to live for. Hedwig, dazed. To live for? Me? Amelia. Why, yes, you are going to be a mother. Hedwig. A mother like her? Looks sadly at the bereaved old mother. Look at her, poor mother, and they never asked her if she wanted this thing to be. Oh, no, I shall never take it like that, never. But you are right, Amelia. I have something to do first. Lets Amelia put the pistol away in the cupboard. I must send a message to the Emperor. The others are more alarmed for her in this mood than in her grief. You said you were going to the front to be a nurse, Amelia. Can you take this message for me? I might take it myself, perhaps. Amelia, hesitating, not knowing what to say or do. Let me give you some tea, Hedwig. Voices are heard outside, and the sounds of sorrow. Someone near the house is weeping. A wild look and a fierce resolve light Hedwig's face. Hedwig, rushing from the house. They have taken my Franz! Mother. Get her back. I feared it. Grief has made her mad. Amelia runs out. A clamor of voices outside. Hedwig can be heard indistinctly speaking to the women. Finally, her voice alone is heard, and in a moment she appears, backing into the doorway, still talking to the women. Hedwig, a tragic light in her face and hand uplifted. I shall send a message to the Emperor. If 10,000 women send one like it, there will be peace and no more war. Then they will hear our tears. A voice. What is the message? Tell us. Hedwig. Soon you will know. Loudly. But I tell you now, don't bear any more children until they promise you there will be no more war. Hertz, suddenly appearing. Amelia follows. I heard you. I declare you under arrest. Come with me. You will be shot for treason. Mother, fearfully, drawing him aside. Don't say that, sir. Wait. Oh, no, you can't do that. She gets out her work-basket and shows him the baby things she has been knitting, and glances significantly at Hedwig. A horrid smile comes into the man's face. Hedwig snatches the things and crushes them to her breast, as if sacrilege has been committed. Hertz. Is this true? You expect... Hedwig, proudly, scornfully. You will not shoot me if I give you a soldier for your empire, and your armies and your guns, will you, Herr Captain? Hertz. Why, no. Every child counts these times. But we will put you under lock and key. You are a firebrand. I warned you. Come along. Hedwig. You want my child, but still you will not promise me what I asked you. Well, we shall see. Hertz. Come along. Hedwig. Give me just a moment. I want to send a message to the Emperor. Will you take it for me, Herr Captain? Mother, signing. Humor her. Hertz. Well, hurry up. Hedwig sits at table and writes a brief note. Mother, whispering. She has lost Franz. She is crazed. Hedwig, rising. There. See that it is placed in the hands of the Emperor. Gives him the note. Goodbye, Amelia. Never be a war bride, Amelia. Kisses her 3 times. Goodbye, Mother. Embraces her tenderly. Thank you for these. She gathers the baby things in her hands, crosses the room, pressing a little sock to her lips. As she passes the cupboard, she deftly seizes the pistol and moves into the bedroom. On the threshold, she looks over her shoulder. Hedwig, firmly. You may read the message out loud. She disappears into the room, still pressing the little sock to her lips. Hertz, reading the note. A message to the Emperor. I refuse to bear my child until you promise there shall be no more war. A shot is fired in the bedroom. They rush into the room. The mother stands trembling by the table. Hertz. awed, coming out of the room with the baby things, which he places on the table. Dead. She was mad. I will hush it up, Maria. He tears up Hedwig's message to the Emperor and goes out of the house, shaking his head. Amelia is kneeling in the doorway of the bedroom, bending over something and softly crying. The mother slowly gathers up the pieces of Hedwig's message and the baby garments, now dashed with blood, and sitting on the bench, holds them tight against her breast, staring straight in front of her, her lips moving inaudibly. She closes her eyes and rocks to and fro, still muttering and praying. Curtain. End of War Brides, a play in 1 act by Marion Craig Wentworth.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Wurzel-Flummery by A. Milne. Read by Ted Delorme
and Kristin Hughes.
From the collection First Plays. Introduction. Wurzel-Flummery was produced by Mr. Dion Boucicault at the New Theatre in April 1917. It was originally written in 3 acts, in which form it was shown to 1 or 2 managers. At the beginning of 1917, I was offered the chance of production in a triple bill if I cut it down into a 2-act play. To cut even a line is painful, but to cut 30 pages of one's first comedy, slaughtering whole characters on the way, has at least a certain morbid fascination. It appeared, therefore, in 2 acts, and one kindly critic embarrassed us by saying that a lesser artist would have written it in 3 acts. And most of the other critics annoyed us by saying that a greater artist would have written it in 1 act. However, I amused myself some months later by slaying another character, the office boy no less, thereby getting it down to 1 act, and was surprised to find that the 1-act version was, after all, the best. At least I think it is. At any rate, that is the version I am printing here. But, as can be imagined, I am rather tired of the whole business by now, and am beginning to wonder if anyone ever did take the name of Wurzel-Flummery at all. Probably the whole thing is an invention. Wurzel-Flummery, a comedy in 1 act. It is a June day before the war in the morning room of Robert Crawshaw's townhouse. Entering it with our friend the house agent, our attention would first be called to the delightful club fender round the fireplace. On one side of this, a Chesterfield sofa comes out at right angles. In a corner of the sofa, Miss Viola Crawshaw is sitting, deep in the Times. The house agent would hesitate to catalogue her, but we notice for ourselves, before he points out the comfortable armchair opposite, that she is young and pretty. In the middle of the room, and facing the fireplace, is a solid knee-hole writing table, covered with papers and books of reference, and supported by a chair at the middle and another at the side. The rest of the furniture and the books and pictures round the walls we must leave until another time, for at this moment the door behind the sofa opens, and Richard Meryton comes in. He looks about 35, has a clean-shaven, intelligent face, and is dressed in a dark tweed suit. We withdraw hastily as he comes behind Viola and puts his hands over her eyes. 3 guesses who it is?
The Archbishop of Canterbury?
No.
The Archbishop of York?
Fortunately, that exhausts the archbishops. Now then, your last guess.
Richard Meryton, MP.
Wonderful. How did you know?
Well, it couldn't have been Father.
No, I suppose not. Not just after breakfast, anyway. Anything in the paper?
There's a letter from Father pointing out that...
I never knew such a man as Robert for pointing out.
Anyhow, it's in big print.
It would be.
You were very cynical this morning, Dick.
The sausages were cold, dear.
Poor Dick. Oh, Dick, I wish you were on the same side as Father.
But he's on the wrong side. Surely I've told you that before. Viola, do you really think it would make a difference?
Well, you know what he said about you at Basingstoke the other day.
No, I don't, really.
He said that your intellectual arrogance was only equalled by your spiritual instability. I don't quite know what it means, but it doesn't sound the sort of thing you want in a son-in-law.
Still, it was friendly of him to go right away to Basingstoke to say it. Anyhow, you don't believe it.
Of course not.
And Robert doesn't really.
Then why does he say it?
Ah, now you're opening up very grave questions. The whole structure of the British Constitution rests upon Robert's right to say things like that at Basingstoke. But really, darling, we're very good friends. He's always asking my advice about things. He doesn't take it, of course, but still he asks it. And it's awfully good of him to insist on my staying here while my flat was being done up. I bless him for that. If it hadn't been for the last week, I should never have known you. You were just Viola, the girl I'd seen at odd times since she was a child. Now, oh, why won't you let me tell your father? I hate it like this.
Because I love you, Dick, and because I know Father. He would, as they say in novels, show you the door. And I want you this side of the door for a little bit longer.
I shall tell him before I go.
But not till then. That gives us 2 more days. You see, darling, it's going to take me all I know to get round him. You see, apart from politics, you're so poor, and Father hates poor people.
Damn money.
I think that's what Father meant by spiritual instability.
Viola. Oh, Lord, look out.
Matches?
Thanks very much. He lights his pipe as Robert Crawshaw comes in. Crawshaw is 45, but his closely trimmed mustache and whiskers, his inclination to stoutness, and the loud, old gentlemanly style in trousers which he affects with his morning coat, make him look older, and, what is more important, the pillar of the state, which he undoubtedly is. Good morning, Richard. Down at last. Good morning. I did warn you, didn't I, that I was bad at breakfasts? Viola, where is your mother?
I don't know, Father. Do you want her?
I wish to speak to her.
All right, I'll tell her.
Richard, why don't you get something to do? My dear fellow, I've only just finished breakfast. I mean generally, and apart, of course, from your, work in the house. I have something to do. Oh, reviewing. I meant something serious. You should get a directorship or something in the city. I hate the city. Ah, there, my dear Richard, is the intellectual arrogance to which I had to call attention the other day at Basingstoke. Yes, so Viola was telling me. You understood, my dear fellow, that I meant nothing personal. And it's justly one of the proudest boasts of the Englishman that his political enmities are not allowed to interfere with his private friendships. Oh, I shall go to Basingstoke myself one day. Enter Margaret. Margaret has been in love with Robert Crawshaw for 25 years, the last 24 years from habit. She is small, comfortable, and rather foolish. You would certainly call her a dear, but you might sometimes call her a poor dear.
Good morning, Mr. Meryton. I do hope your breakfast was all right.
Excellent, thank you.
That's right. Did you want me, Robert?
Yes. Richard, what are your plans? Is he trying to get rid of me, Mrs. Crawshaw?
Of course not. Are you, dear?
Perhaps we had better come into my room, Margaret. We can leave Richard here with the paper. No, I'm going. I have some particular business to discuss. If you aren't going out, I should like to consult you in the matter afterwards. Right. Sit down, Margaret. I have some extraordinary news for you.
Yes, Robert?
This letter has just come by hand. 199 Lincoln's Inn Fields. Dear Sir, I have pleasure to inform you that under the will of the late Mr. Anthony Clifton, you are a beneficiary to the extent of £50,000.
Robert!
Wait! A trifling condition is attached, namely, that you should take the name of Wurzel-Flummery.
Robert!
I have the honor to be your obedient servant, Dennis Clifton.
Robert, whoever is he? I mean the one who's left you the money.
I have not the slightest idea, Margaret. Doubtless we shall find out before long. I have asked Mr. Dennis Clifton to come and see me.
Leaving you £50,000. Just fancy.
Wurzel-Flummery.
We can have the second car now, dear, can't we? And what about moving? You know you always said you ought to be in a more central part. Mr. Robert Crawshaw, MP of Curzon Street, sounds so much more cabinety.
Mr. Robert Wurzel-Flummery, MP of Curzon Street. I don't know what that sounds like.
I expect that's only a legal way of putting it, dear. They can't really expect us to change our names to Worsley-Fothergill.
Wurzel-Flummery.
Yes, dear, didn't I say that? I am sure you could talk the solicitor round. This Mr. Dennis Clifton. After all, it doesn't matter to him what we call ourselves. Write him one of your letters, dear.
You don't seem to apprehend the situation, Margaret.
Yes, I do, dear. This Mr.
Anthony Clifton.
Yes, he's left you £50,000, together with the name of Worsley-Fothergill.
Oh, well, never mind.
Yes, well, you tell the solicitor that you will take the £50,000, but you don't want the name. It's too absurd, when everybody knows of Robert Crawshaw, MP, to expect you to call yourself Worsley-Fothergill.
Yes. The point is that this Mr. Clifton has left me the money on condition that I change my name. If I don't take the name, I don't take the money.
But is that legal?
Perfectly. It is often done. People change their names on succeeding to some property.
I thought it was only when your name was Moses and you changed it to Talbot.
Wurzel-Flummery.
I wonder why he left you the money at all. Of course, it was very nice of him, dear. But if you didn't know him, why do you think he did it, dear?
I know no more than this letter. I suppose he had followed my career and was interested in it, and being a man with no relations, felt that he could safely leave this money to me. No doubt Wurzel-Flummery was his mother's maiden name, or the name of some other friend even dearer to him. He wished the name perpetuated, perhaps even recorded not unworthily in the history of our country, and made this will accordingly. In a way, it is kind of, a sacred trust.
Then of course you'll accept it, dear.
It requires some consideration. I have my career to think about, my duty to my country.
Of course, dear. Money is a great help in politics, isn't it?
Money wisely spent is a help in any profession. The view of riches which socialists and such like people profess to take is entirely ill-considered. A rich man who spends his money thoughtfully is serving his country as nobly as anybody.
Yes, dear. Then you think we could have that second car and the house in Curzon Street?
We must not be led away. £50,000 properly invested is only £2,000 a year. When you have deducted the income tax, and the tax on unearned income is extremely high just now.
Oh, but surely if we have to call ourselves Wurzel-Flummery, it would count as earned income.
I fear not. Strictly speaking, all money is earned. Even if it is left to you by another, it is presumably left to you in recognition of certain outstanding qualities which you possess. But Parliament takes a different view. I do not for a moment say that £50,000 would not be welcome. £50 is certainly not to be sneezed at.
I should think not indeed.
And without this preposterous condition attached, I should be pleased to accept this trust, and I would endeavour, Mr. Speaker, I would, Margaret, to carry it out to the best of my poor ability. But Wurzel-Flummery!
You would soon get used to it, dear. I had to get used to the name of Crawshaw after I had been Debenham for 25 years. It is surprising how quickly it comes to you. I think I only signed my name Margaret Debenham once after I was married.
The cases are rather different, Margaret. Naturally, a woman who from her cradle looks forward to the day when she will change her name cannot have this feeling for the honour of his name which every man feels. Such a feeling is naturally more present in my own case, since I have been privileged to make the name of Crawshaw, in some degree, well known. I might almost say famous.
I used to be called the beautiful Miss Debenham of Leamington. Everybody in Leamington knew of me. Of course, I am very proud to be Mrs. Robert Crawshaw.
In a way, it would mean beginning all over again. It is half the battle in politics to get your name before the public. Whoever is this man Wurzel-Flummery, people will say.
Anyhow, dear, let us look on the bright side. £50,000 is £50,000.
It is, Margaret, and no doubt it is my duty to accept it. But, well, all I say is that a gentleman would have left it without any conditions. Or at least he would merely have expressed his wish that I should take the name, without going so far as to enforce it. Then I could have looked at the matter all round in an impartial spirit.
The linen is marked RMC now. Of course, we should have to have that altered. Do you think RMF would do, or would it have to be RMW-F?
What? Oh, yes, there will be a good deal of that to attend to. I think, Margaret, I had better talk to Richard about this. Of course, it would be absurd to refuse the money, but, well, I should like to have his opinion.
Do you think he would be very sympathetic, dear? He makes jokes about serious things, like bishops and hunting, just as if they weren't at all serious.
I wish to talk to him just to obtain a new point of view. I do not hold myself in the least bound to act on anything he says. I regard him as a constituent, Margaret.
Then I will send him to you.
Margaret, what do you really feel about it?
Just whatever you feel, Robert.
Thank you, Margaret. You are a good wife to me. Crawshaw goes to his desk and selects a Who's Who from a little pile of reference books on it. He walks round to his chair, sits down in it, and begins to turn the pages, murmuring names beginning with C to himself as he gets near the place. When he finds it, he murmurs, "Clifton. That's funny," and closes the book. Evidently the publishers have failed him. Well, what's the news? Been left a fortune? Yes, by a Mr. Anthony Clifton. I never met him, and I know nothing about him. Not really? Well, I congratulate you. To them that hath. But what on earth do you want my advice about? There is a slight condition attached. Oh. The condition is that with this money, £50,000, I take the name of Wurzel-Flummery. What? I said it quite distinctly. Wurzel-Flummery. Richard, in awed silence, walks over to the desk and stands looking down at the unhappy Crawshaw. He throws out his left hand as if introducing him. Mr. Robert Wurzel-Flummery, M.P., one of the most prominent of our younger parliamentarians. Oh, you! Oh, how too heavenly! He goes back to his seat, looks up, and catches Crawshaw's eye, then breaks down altogether. Shall we discuss it seriously, or shall we leave it? And how can we discuss a name like Wurzel-Flummery seriously? Mr. Wurzel-Flummery, in a few well-chosen words, seconded the motion. Sir, went on Mr. Wurzel-Flummery. Oh, poor Robert. You seem quite certain that I shall take the money. I am quite certain. Would you take it? Well, I wonder. After all, as William Shakespeare says, what's in a name? I can tell you something else that William Shakespeare said. Who steals my purse, with 50,000 in it, steals trash. Trash, Robert. But he who filches from me my good name of Crawshaw and substitutes the rotten one of Wurzel. As a matter of fact, Wurzel-Flummery is a very good old name. I seem to remember some Hampshire Wurzel-Flummerys. It is a very laudable spirit on the part of a dying man to wish to perpetuate these old English names. It all seems to me quite natural and straightforward. If I take this money, I shall have nothing to be ashamed of. I see. Look here, may I ask you a few questions? I should like to know just how you feel about the whole business. Go ahead. Suppose a stranger came up in the street to you and said, "My poor man, here's £5 for you." What would you do? Tell him to go to the devil, I suppose, wouldn't you? In more parliamentary language, perhaps, Richard. I should tell him I never took money from strangers. Quite so, but that if it were £10,000, you would take it. I most certainly shouldn't. But if he died and left it to you, then you would. Ah, I thought you were leading up to that. That, of course, is entirely different. Why? Well, wouldn't you take £10,000 if it were left to you by a stranger? I dare say I should, but I should like to know why it would seem different. Well, in the first place, when a man is dead, he wants his money no longer. You can therefore be certain that you are not taking anything from him which he cannot spare. And in the next place, it is the man's dying wish that you should have the money. To refuse would be to refuse the dead. To accept becomes almost a sacred duty. It really comes to this, doesn't it? You won't take it from him when he's alive, because if you did, you couldn't decently refuse him a little gratitude. But you know that it doesn't matter a damn to him what happens to his money after he's dead, and therefore you can take it without feeling any gratitude at all. No, I shouldn't put it like that. I'm sure you wouldn't, Robert. No doubt you can twist it about so that... All right, we'll leave that and go on to the next point. Suppose a perfect stranger offered you £5 to part your hair down the middle, shave off your moustache, and wear only one whisker. If he met you suddenly in the street, seemed to dislike your appearance, took out a fiver, and begged you to hurry off and alter yourself, of course you'd pocket the money and go straight to your barber's. Now you are merely being offensive. I beg your pardon. I should have said that if he had left you £5 in his will, well then, £20, £100, £1,000, £50,000. It's only a question of price. £50,000, Robert. A pink tie with purple spots, hair across the back, trousers with a patch in the fall myself, Wurzel-Flummery. Any old thing you like. You can't insult me. Anything you like, gentlemen, for £50,000. Only you must leave it in your will, and then I can feel that it is a sacred duty. A sacred duty, my lords and gentlemen. It is evidently useless to prolong this conversation. No, Robert. I finished. I just took the other side, and I got carried away. I ought to have been at the bar. You take such extraordinary views of things. You must look facts in the face, Richard. This is a modern world, and we are modern people living in it. Take the matter-of-fact view. You may like or dislike the name of Wurzel-Flummery, but you can't get away from the fact that £50,000 is not to be sneezed at. I don't know why people shouldn't sneeze at money sometimes. I should like to start a society for sneezing at £50,000. We'd have to begin in a small way, of course. We'd begin by sneezing at £5 and work up. The trouble is that we're all inoculated in our cradles against that kind of cold. You will have your little joke. But you know as well as I do that it is only a joke. There can be no serious reason why I should not take this money. And I gather that you don't think it will affect my career? Not a bit. It'll help it. It'll get you into all the comic papers. Margaret comes in at this moment, to the relief of Crawshaw, who is not quite certain if he is being flattered or insulted again.
Well, have you told him?
I have heard the news, Mrs. Crawshaw, and I have told Robert my opinion, that he should have no difficulty in making the name of Wurzel-Flummery as famous as he has already made that of Crawshaw. At any rate, I hope he will.
How nice of you.
Well, it's settled, then. This solicitor fellow should be here soon. Perhaps, after all, we can manage something about... Ah, Viola, did you want your mother?
Sorry, do I interrupt a family meeting? There's Richard, so it can't be very serious.
What a reputation. Well, it's over now.
Viola had better know, hadn't she?
She'll have to know sometime, of course.
Of course she will, so you'd better tell her now. I knew there was something exciting going on this morning.
Perhaps you'd better tell her, dear.
Father has come into some property, Viola. It means changing our name, unfortunately. But your father doesn't think it will matter. How thrilling! What's the name, Mother? Your father says it is... Oh, dear me, I shall never remember it.
Wurzel-Flummery.
Dick, you tell me if nobody else will.
Robert said it just now.
That wasn't a name, was it? I thought it was just a... Do say it again, Father.
Wurzel-Flummery.
Do you spell it like that? I mean, like a Wurzel and like Flummery.
Exactly, I believe.
Miss Viola Wurzel-Flummery. I mean, they'd have to look at you, wouldn't they? Oh, Dick, what a heavenly name. Who had it first?
They are an old Hampshire family. That is so, isn't it, Robert? I said I thought that I remembered. Margaret, can you find Burke there?
Well, Viola, you haven't told us how you like being Miss Wurzel-Flummery. I haven't realized myself yet, Mummy. I shall have to stand in front of my glass and tell myself who I am.
It's all right for you. You know you'll change your name one day, and then it won't matter what you've been called before.
Shh. Oh, won't it? It's got to appear in the papers. A marriage has been arranged between Miss Viola Wurzel-Flummery, and everybody will say, and about time too, poor girl. Have you found it, dear?
This is the 1912 edition.
Still, dear, if it's a very old family, it ought to be in by then. I don't mind how old it is. I think it's lovely. Oh, Dick, what fun it will be being announced. Just think of the footman throwing open the door and saying, Mr. Dennis Clifton.
There is a little natural confusion as Clifton enters jauntily in his summer suiting with a bundle of papers under his arm. Crawshaw goes towards him and shakes hands. How do you do, Mr. Clifton? Very good of you to come. It is Mr. Dennis Clifton, the solicitor. It is. I must apologize for not looking the part more, but my clothes did not arrive from Clarkson's in time. Very careless of them when they had promised, and my clerk dissuaded me from the side whiskers which I keep by me for these occasions. Yes, quite so. But you have full legal authority to act in this matter. Oh, decidedly. Oh, there's no question of that. My wife and daughter, my friend, Mr. Richard Meryton. Dear me, Mr. Meryton, too. This is quite a situation, as we say in the profession. In the legal profession? In the theatrical profession. I am a writer of plays, Mrs. Crawshaw. I am not giving away a professional secret when I tell you that most of the managers in London have thanked me for submitting my work to them. I understood, Mr. Clifton, that you were the solicitor employed to wind up the affairs of the late Mr. Anthony Clifton. Oh, certainly. There's no doubt about my being a solicitor. My clerk, a man of the utmost integrity, not to say probity, would give me a reference. I am in the books. I belong to the Law Society, but my heart turns elsewhere. Officially, I have embraced the profession of a solicitor, but you know what these official embraces are.
I'm afraid.
Unofficially, Mr. Meryton, I am wedded to the Muses.
Dick, isn't he lovely?
Quite so. But just for the moment, Mr. Clifton, I take it that we are concerned with the legal business. Should I ever wish to produce a play, the case would be different. Admirably put. Pray regard me entirely as a solicitor for as long as you wish. Mr. Dennis Clifton was superb as a solicitor. In spite of an indifferent make-up, his manner of taking off his gloves and dropping them into his hat...
I think perhaps Viola and I...
We'll leave you to your business, Robert. Just one moment, if I may. I have a letter for you, Mr. Meryton. For me? Yes, my clerk, a man of the utmost integrity... Oh, but I said that before. He took it round to your rooms this morning, but found only painters and decorators there. I brought it along, hoping that Mr. Crawshaw... But of course I never expected anything so delightful as this. Thanks. Oh, but do read it now, won't you? One so rarely has the opportunity of being present when one's own letters are read. I think the habit they have on the stage of reading letters aloud to one another is such a very delightful one. Richard, with a smile and a shrug, opens his letter while Clifton is talking. Good Lord!
Dick, what is it?
199 Lincoln's Inn Fields. Dear Sir, I have the pleasure to inform you that under the will of the late Mr. Anthony Clifton, you are a beneficiary to the extent of £50,000.
Dick!
A trifling condition is attached, namely that you should take the name of Wurzel-Flummery. Impossible! Why should he leave any money to you?
Dick, how wonderful! I don't remember ever having a morning quite like this.
Is this a joke, Mr. Clifton? Oh, the money is there, all right. My clerk, a man of the utmost... Then I refuse it. I'll have nothing to do with it. I won't even argue about it. That's what I think of your money.
Dick, Oh, but Mother, he mustn't. Oh, I must tell him. Really, Mr. Clifton, I'm surprised at you.
And now, Mr. Crawshaw, we are alone. Yes, well, I think, Mr. Clifton, you have a good deal to explain. My dear sir, I'm longing to begin. I have been looking forward to this day for weeks. I spent over an hour this morning dressing for it. Perhaps I had better begin from the beginning. The documents in the case? Oh, dear no, just something to carry in the hand. It makes one look more like a solicitor. Watherston versus Towser, in reference the Great Missenden Canal Company. My clerk invents the titles. It keeps him busy. He is very fond of Towser. Towser is always coming in. You see, Mr. Crawshaw, this is my first real case, and I only got it because Anthony Clifton is my uncle. My efforts to introduce a little picturesqueness into the dull formalities of the law do not meet with that response that one would have expected. Yes, well, I'm a busy man, and if you could tell me as shortly as possible why your uncle left this money to me, and apparently to Mr. Meryton too, under these extraordinary conditions, I shall be obliged to you. Say no more, Mr. Crawshaw. I look forward to being entirely frank with you. It will be a pleasure. You understand, of course, my position. I think I may say that I am not without reputation in the country, and proud as I am to accept this sacred trust, this money which the late Mr. Anthony Clifton has seen fit, one can not say why, to bequeath to me, yet the use of the name Wurzel-Flummery would be excessively awkward. Excessively. My object in seeing you was to inquire if it was absolutely essential that the name should go with the money. Well, you may have the name without the money if you like, but you must have the name. Ah, of course, I have nothing against the name, a good old Hampshire name. My dear Mr. Crawshaw, you didn't really think that anybody had been called Wurzel-Flummery before? Oh, no, no. You and Mr. Meryton were to be the first, the founders of the clan, the designers of the Wurzel-Flummery sporran. What do you mean, sir? Are you telling me that it is not a real name at all? Oh, it's a name, all right. I know it is because I made it up. And you have the impudence to propose, sir, that I should take a made-up name? Well, all names are made up some time or other. Somebody had to think of Adam. I warn you, Mr. Clifton, that I do not allow this trifling with serious subjects. It's all so simple, really. You see, my Uncle Antony was a rather unusual man. He despised money. He was not afraid to put it in its proper place. The place he put it in was a little below golf and a little above classical concerts. If a man said to him, "Would you like to make 50,000 this afternoon?" he would say, "Well, it would depend what he was doing." If he were going to have a round at Walton Heath, "It's perfectly scandalous to talk of money in this way." Well, that's how he talked about it. But he didn't find many to agree with him. In fact, he used to say that there was nothing, however contemptible, that a man would not do for money. One day I suggested that if he left a legacy with a sufficiently foolish name attached to it, somebody might be found to refuse it. He laughed at the idea. That put me on my mettle. 2 people, I said. Leave the silly name to 2 people. 2 well-known people, rival politicians, say, men whose own names are already public property. Surely they wouldn't both take it. That touched him. "Dennis, my boy, you've got it," he said. "Upon what vile bodies shall we experiment?" We decided on you and Mr. Meryton. The next thing was to choose the name. I started on the wrong lines. I began by suggesting names like Porker, Tosh, Bug, Spiffkins, the obvious sort. My uncle... "How dare you discuss me with your uncle, sir? How dare you decide in this cold-blooded way whether I am to be called Tosh or Porker?" My uncle wouldn't hear of Tosh or Porker. He wanted a humorous name, a name he could roll lovingly round his tongue, a name expressing a sort of humorous contempt. Wurzel-Flummery. I can see now the happy, ruminating smile which came so often on my Uncle Antony's face in those latter months. He was thinking of his 2 Wurzel-Flummerys. I remember him saying once, it was at the zoo, what a pity it was he hadn't enough to divide among the whole cabinet. A whole bunch of Wurzel-Flummerys. It would have been rather jolly. You force me to say, sir, that if that was the way you and your uncle used to talk together, that his death can only be described as a merciful intervention of Providence. Oh, but I think he must be enjoying all this somewhere, you know. I hope he is. He would have loved this morning. It was his one regret that from the necessities of the case he could not live to enjoy his own joke. But he had hopes that echoes of it would reach him wherever he might be. It was with some such idea, I fancy, that toward the end he became interested in spiritualism. Mr. Clifton, I have no interest in the present whereabouts of your uncle, nor in what means he has of overhearing a private conversation between you and myself. But if, as you irreverently suggest, he is listening to us, I should like him to hear this, that in my opinion you are not a qualified solicitor at all, that you never had an uncle, and that the whole story of the will and the ridiculous condition attached to it is just the tomfool joke of a man who, by his own admission, wastes most of his time writing unsuccessful farces. And I propose, pardon my interrupting, but you said farces, not farces, comedies of a whimsical nature. Whatever they were, sir, I propose to report the whole matter to the Law Society, and you know your way out, sir. Then I am to understand that you refuse the legacy, Mr. Crawshaw? What's that? I am to understand that you refuse the £50,000. If the money is really there, I most certainly do not refuse it. Oh, the money is most certainly there, and the name, both waiting for you. Then, sir, I accept them. I feel it my duty to accept them as a public expression of confidence in the late Mr. Clifton's motives. I repudiate entirely the motives that you have suggested to him, and I consider it a sacred duty to show what I think of your story by accepting the trust which he has bequeathed to me. You will arrange further matters with my solicitor. Good morning, sir. Mr. Crawshaw, here, drink a glass of water. Mr. Wurzel-Flummery, farewell. May I express the parting wish that your future career will add fresh luster to my name. Exit, Mr. Dennis Clifton, with dignity. But he has left his papers behind him. Crawshaw, walking indignantly back to the sofa, sees the papers and picks them up. Watherston versus Towsers, in reference, Great Missenden Canal Company. Bah! He tears them up and throws them into the fire. He goes back to his writing table and is seated there as Viola, followed by Meryton, comes in.
Father, Dick doesn't want to take the money, but I've told him that of course he must. He must, mustn't he?
Now, we needn't drag Robert into it, Viola. If Richard has a very natural feeling that it would be awkward for me if there were 2 Wurzel-Flummerys in the House of Commons, I should be the last to interfere with his decision. In any case, I don't see what concern it is of yours, Viola.
But how can we get married if he doesn't take the money?
Married? What does this mean, Richard? I'm sorry it has to come out like this. We ought to have told you before, but anyhow, we were going to have told you in a day or two. Viola and I want to get married. And what did you want to get married on? Not very much, I'm afraid.
We're all right now, Father, because we shall have £50,000.
Oh, Viola, Viola. But naturally, this puts a very different complexion on matters.
So of course he must take it, mustn't he, Father?
I can hardly suppose, Richard, that you expect me to entrust my daughter to a man who is so little provident for himself that he throws away £50,000 because of some fanciful objection to the name which goes with it. You don't understand, Robert. I understand this, Richard, that if the name is good enough for me, it should be good enough for you. You don't mind asking Viola to take your name, but you consider it an insult if you are asked to take my name. Do you want to be Mrs. Wurzel-Flummery?
Well, I'm going to be Miss Wurzel-Flummery anyhow, darling.
Oh, heaven help me. You'll make me take it. But you'll never understand. Come, Richard. I understand perfectly all that you were saying about money a little while ago. It's all perfectly true. It's all just what I feel myself. But in practice, we have to make allowances sometimes. We have to sacrifice our ideals for others. I shall be very proud to have you for a son-in-law, and to feel that there will be the two of us in Parliament together, upholding the honor of the name. And perhaps now that we are to be so closely related, you may come to feel some day that your views could be more adequately put forward from my side of the house. Go on, Robert, I deserve it. Well, Margaret will be interested in our news, and you must send that solicitor a line, or perhaps a telephone message would be better. Yes, I think the telephone, Richard. It would be safer. Come here, Mrs. Wurzel-Flummery.
Not Mrs. Wurzel-Flummery, Mrs. Dick. And soon, please, darling.
I don't know what I've done, Viola, but you're worth it. And God help me if I ever stop thinking so. Enter Mr. Dennis Clifton. He sees them and walks about very tactfully with his back towards them, humming to himself. Hello. Now, where did I put those papers? And now where... Oh, I beg your pardon. I left some papers behind.
Dick, you'll tell him. Goodbye, Mr. Clifton, and thank you for writing such nice letters.
Goodbye, Miss Crawshaw.
Just say it to see how it sounds.
Goodbye, Miss Wurzel-Flummery.
No, not Miss. Mrs.
You don't mean... Yes, and I'm taking the money after all, Mr. Clifton. Dear me, what a situation. I wonder how a rough scenario would strike the managers. Poor Mr. Clifton. Why poor? You missed all the best part. You didn't hear what I said to Crawshaw about money before you came. Oh, was it very... Well, I expect Uncle Antony heard. Well, I must be getting on. I wonder if you've noticed any important papers lying about in connection with the Great Missenden Canal Company. A most intricate case in which my clerk and I... He has murmured himself across to the fireplace, and the fragments of his important case suddenly catch his eye. He picks up one of the fragments. Ah, yes. Well, I shall tell my clerk that we lost the case. He will be sorry. He had got quite fond of that canal. So you're taking the money, Mr. Meryton? Yes. And Mr. Crawshaw, too? Yes. They are both taking it. He stops and looks up to Uncle Antony with a smile. Good old Uncle Antony. He knew. He knew. End. Wurzel-Flummery by A. Milne. This recording is in the public domain.